The river's breeze carried the scent of papyrus and dung, of incense and sweat. She glanced at her father, his eyes closed in meditation, and wondered if he truly felt Ra's favor and or if it was the opium wine he sipped each dusk. As the barge neared Philly, the air changed. The Nile narrowed, its currents quickening around jagged outcrops. Here, the river was a living god, its voice a roar as it churned against the rocks. Priests clad in white began a frenzied dance, their systems jingling, their feet stomping in time to drums made of hippo hide. Deference Nile, they cried, tossing golden chalices into the rapids. One chalice struck a stone and sank, its descent watched by crocodiles lurking beneath the surface. Meridian gripped the rail. She had heard tales of Philly's power and of how the goddess Isis had pieced Osiris back together on this very island. Now, as the barge rounded the bend, the temple emerged, a forest of lotus-columned halls, their walls carved with tales of resurrection. Priests emerged bearing alabaster jars of sacred water, their heads bowed beneath the weight of their own devotion. Suddenly, the barge shuddered. A gasp rippled through the crowd, as the solar vessel listed, its hull groaning against a hidden rock. Nakhnabef's eyes flew open. "Rock earth this river," he barked, though his voice trembled. The high priest Hipposeneb dropped to his knees, pressing his forehead to the deck. "The Nile demands respect, son of Ra," he whispered. "Deference Nile, lest it swallow us whole." For a breath, all was chaos. Sailors plunged poles into the water, fan-bearers scrambled to steady the pharaoh's throne. Meridian stumbled, her minute slipping from her hands into the river. She lunged for it, but the necklace sank swiftly, its beads glinting like fish scales. Then, as though appeased, the Nile stilled. The barge righted itself, and the procession continued. That night, docked at Aswan, Meridian slipped from her tent. The desert cold bit through her shawl, as she crept to the river's edge. Moonlight silvered the water, and for a moment, she imagined she saw her necklace suspended in the depths, cradled by the current. "You seek what the Nile has claimed," came a voice. She turned. A Nubian slave girl stood nearby, her arms laden with clay jars. Her eyes were kohl-rimmed, her hair braided with cowrie shells. "It was my mother's," Meridian said. The girl nodded. "The Nile keeps what it loves. Even gods pay deference Nile." She tilted her head, studying the princess. "You could die for it. But the crocodiles are hungry, and the river ellipsis points jealous." Meridian hesitated, then stepped back. At dawn, the flotilla departed. The pharaoh's barge floated on, past Abu Simbel's colossal Ramses, past the drowned villages where fishermen cast nets over submerged tombs. Nakhnabef resumed his meditations, his fear forgotten. Hipposeneb chanted louder, as though volume might bend the Nile's will. Meridian said nothing. But when they reached Memphis, where the river fanned into the delta's green embrace, she ordered her scribe to etch a new hieroglyph into her personal scroll, a wave cradling a bead. Deference Nile, she thought, as the city's white walls rose in the distance. And far upstream, in the silt beneath Philly's rapids, the men had settled among broken chalices and the bones of those who dared defy the river's hunger. The crocodiles circled, but did not touch it. Some offerings, even the Nile deigns to keep. Title: The Gilded Chains of Ashford-on-Wyvern. The mayoral residence of Ashford-on-Wyvern, a honey-stoned Georgian mansion known as Wyvern House, stood sentinel atop the town's lone hill. Its ivy-clad walls glowed amber in the autumn twilight, while its leaded windows winked like sly eyes over the cobbled streets below. The gardens, a tapestry of rose beds and yew hedges, sloped down to the river Wyvern, its waters reflecting the flickering gas lamps of the town square. Inside, the air smelled of beeswax polish and ambition. Mayor Reginald Thorne adjusted his crimson mayoral robe, a relic from the 19th century, trimmed in ermine and heavy, as Sinembedge glanced at his reflection in the title, The Illusional Urinal of Kundruker. Gary Jiggix's voice boomed across the basement table, his hands gesturing like a conductor orchestrating chaos. The stench of damp moss and iron fills your nostrils, as you descend into the third level of Kundruker's Folly. Torchlight flickers against jagged stone, and somewhere in the shadows, the clink of armor echoes. It was 1981, and the adventuring party engaged a human fighter named Roland, an elf fighter called Eldrin, a dwarf fighter named Threem, a human magic user dubbed Lula, a hobby thief known as Milo, and Xander, a bespectacled human illusionist. Embedge leaned forward, dice clutched like holy relics. Trolls, Thrain grumbled, his beard bristling. Bet my axe there's trolls down here. Orcs first, Jiggix replied, a sly grin forming. Roll for initiative. The clatter of dice sealed their fate. 10 orcs, greasy-skinned and snorting, surged from side passages, scimitars raised. Roland's long sword arced through the dimness, cleaving an orc's skull, while Eldrin's elven blade danced like silver lightning. Thrain roared, his warhammer crumpling armor, and Milo darted between legs, backstabbing with a chuckle. Lewin cannoned magic missile, spectral darts piercing throats. Xander, however, fumbled his spellbook. I have cast phantasmal force. To conjure ellipsis points a boulder. To block the rear flank. Jiggix raised an eyebrow. Roll for success. The die tumbled, a 3. A boulder materializes, Jiggix began, but its ellipsis points translucent. And porcelain. And there's a lever. The party froze as a pristine white urinal, complete with flushing handle, shimmered into existence beside Xander. Water gurgled theatrically. My Morden's Forge, Thrain spat, what is that? An ellipsis points illusional urinal. Xander squeaked, adjusting his glasses. Must have misread the runes. The orcs hesitated, sniffing the air. One poked the urinal, its hand passing through. Enraged, the creatures renewed their assault. Roland parried a scimitar, yelling, Xander, fix this. Working on it. Xander yelped, flipping pages. The battle raged. Lewis' sleep spell felled 3 orcs, while Milo pickpocketed a javelin mid-throw. But as the last orc fell, guttural bellows shook the chamber. 2 hulking trolls, moss green and reeking of rot, lumbered into the fray, claws slashing. Fire! Lilith cried. They'll regenerate, unless we burn them. Eldrin lit a torch, but a troll backhanded him into a wall. Roland hacked at a rubbery limb, only for the wound to seal. Thrain ducked a swipe, hammer swinging. Xander, do something. Panicking, Xander blurted, phantasmal force again. A flaming boulder this time. Another roll, 4. The illusional urinal reappeared, now spurting illusory flames. The trolls paused, cocking their heads. Its ellipsis points on fire? Milo blinked. No, it's just flushing. Xander moaned. The trolls, baffled, prodded the urinal. One yanked the handle, triggering a loud whoosh. The sound echoed, and the trolls simple creatures of hunger and confusion stumbled back, clutching their ears. Now! Roland shouted. Lula hurled a fireball, engulfing both trolls. Eldrin rallied, driving his blade into charred flesh. Thrain crushed skulls, and Milo jammed a torch into a regenerating torso. The trolls collapsed, smoldering. Jiggix leaned back, grinning. The chamber falls silent, save for the gentle glug-glug of Xander's ellipsis points creation. The illusional urinal flickered, its purpose eternally enigmatic. Why a urinal? Milo asked, wiping orc blood off his dagger. Xander turned crimson. I panicked. The spell component's ellipsis points, I think I mixed up prestidigitation and phantasmal force. Thrain snorted. Aye, and we'll never let ye forget it, lad. As the party looted the trolls, Jiggix described a carved oak door ahead, promising treasure and death or doom. But the tale of Kundruker's folly would forever be punctuated by the legend of the illusional urinal, a spectral toilet that saved the day. Title: The Dry Run of Doom. The wind howled across the frozen steppes of Cimmeria, biting through furs and rattling the bones of the dead strung up on gnarled trees. 8-year-old Conan, his small hands calloused from chopping wood, crouched beside his father, Corin, at the edge of their village. The boy's mother, Mirella, stirred a cauldron of stew nearby, her eyes flicking nervously to the horizon. Corin, a blacksmith whose arms were thicker than the anvil he pounded daily, gripped his sword and a relic forged from Cimmerian steel. Remember, Conan, he growled, strength alone isn't victory. A wolf's cunning wins the hunt. But today, the wolves wore human faces. A thunder of hoofs shattered the silence. From the mist emerged a horde of riders hulking, fur-clad figures atop shaggy horses. At their lead rode Thulsadum, his serpentine voice slicing the air like a dagger. James Earl Jones's baritone rolled across the tundra, as he raised a jeweled fist, halting his warband. His armor gleamed obsidian, his eyes colder than the ice underfoot. Flanking him were 3 riders, Ben Johnson, grizzled and scowling beneath the silver wolf pelt wig, and 2 oak-limbed men whose thighs strained against their saddles. These were Oakland Raiders linemen, their jerseys peeking beneath mismatched armor, their helmets swapped for horn Viking helms. Mostly. Focus, you fools. Falsadum hissed, glaring at the raider on his left. Embedge a mountain of a man whose wig had slipped, revealing a sweaty number 72 jersey. This is a maraud, not a tailgate. The jersey-clad raider, Hendricks stitched on his chest, shrugged. Sorry, Coach Embedge of Dark Lord. Falsadum pinched the bridge of his nose. Again. From the crest. The warband wheeled their horses back up the hill, Rottweilers with spiked collars snarling at their heels. Conan's father narrowed his eyes. Something's ellipsis points off, he muttered. The dog's barks echoed unnaturally, like stallions clapping coconuts for hoofbeats. Maraud. Falsadum bellowed, his voice booming through the valley. The riders charged Embedge a chaotic stampede. Ben Johnson, ever the professional, brandished a prop axe with convincing fury. The other raider, wig securely tied, howled like a banshee. Hendricks, however, struggled to keep pace, his jersey flapping in the wind. As they neared the village, Falsadum hissed, burn the huts. Act like you mean it. The Rottweilers lunged forward, teeth snapping at villagers' extras in sheepskin coats, while Hendricks fumbled a torch. Instead of tossing it onto a thatched roof, he dropped it into a puddle. The flame died with a hiss. Cut. Falsadum roared, yanking his horse's reins. The warband skidded to a halt, dogs whining. This is a rehearsal for Ragnarok, not a children's pantomime. You Embedge, he pointed at Hendricks. Embedge are a marauder, not a man who forgets his lunch pail. Hendricks saluted. Yes sir. No more screw-ups. From the shadows, Conan tugged his father's sleeve. Why do they pretend, father? Corin's jaw tightened. They are not pretending, boy. They are ellipsis points practicing. Falsadum dismounted, his patience fraying. Once more. Properly. This time, the marauders rallied. Hendricks jammed his wig on, the Raiders' logo hidden beneath a bearskin cloak. The Rottweilers, spurred by stallions in furs, lunged with rehearsed ferocity. Falsadum raised his arms, chanting faux sorceries, as villagers fell dramatically. Conan's mother, Mirella, flung a bucket of red dye stage blood across her apron and collapsed, wailing. Better. Falsadum barked. Now, the boy Embedge, where's the boy? All eyes turned to Conan, still clinging to his father's sword. Falsadum's gaze softened, a viper coiling before the strike. You, he purred, will kneel, child. Kneel and beg. Corin stepped forward, blade raised. Touch him, and I'll split your skull. For a heartbeat, the air crackled. Then Falsadum laughed. Embedge a sound like gravel in a coffin. Save the theatrics for the cameras, blacksmith. He turned to his warband. Enough. We maraud at dawn. And you Embedge, he glared at Hendricks. Embedge, find a helmet that fits. Or I'll nail it to your skull. As the riders retreated, Hendricks' wig slipped again. Conan blinked at the Raiders' logo, its silver and black clash against the ancient armor. Father, he whispered, what is ellipsis points Oakland? Corin spat. A place weaker than Cimmeria. That night, as the village feigned repairs, Falsadum's Rottweilers gnawed prop bones. Hendricks sheepishly approached Mirella's stupid. Man, but ellipsis points any leftovers? She eyed his jersey. You're not Vanier. Nah. Just a guy from Fresno. Epilogue. When the real maraud came at dawn, Falsadum's horde was flawless. Embedge, no jerseys, no missed cues. Steel-bit flesh, fire-consumed huts, and Conan's world ended in blood and snow. But decades later, when King Conan crushed his enemies, he'd sometimes pause, his scarred lips quirking at the memory of a man named Hendricks. Ellipsis points and the day Doom wore a football number. Title, Shakti, Shiva Vogeshkov. The marigold garlands strung above the temple gates swayed in the humid breeze, their saffron petals brushing against the glossy cover of Vogue magazine. Priya, the vendor, adjusted her stall's tarp to shield the stack of issues from the midday sunday. Her usual stock Embedge incense sticks, coconut offerings, and miniature Shiva lingams Embedge had been pushed aside for the latest sensation, a German model named Shakti Klein, her face smoldering under the headline Shiva Vogeshkov, the divine edge of modernity. Only 200 rupees, Auntie. Priya called to a passing devotee, who paused, torn between piety and curiosity. On the cover, Shakti glared through kohl-rimmed eyes, her jet black hair cascading over a leather choker studded with tiny silver trishles. Her lips, painted the shade of burnt temple ash, curled in a smirk that mirrored Parvati's playful defiance in ancient frescoes. But here, the goddess of power was reborn. M-21, Berlin raised, and unapologetically goth. The shoot, 3 weeks earlier, photographer Klaus Ritter had paced his Mumbai studio, muttering about cosmic contrast. He'd scouted Shakti at a Berlin nightclub, where she'd been dancing to industrial metal in a sari ripped at the hem. "You're not just a model," he'd said. "You're Shakti, the force that moves Shiva himself." For the cover, Klaus draped her in a hybrid ensemble, a black lace corset evoking Kelly's wrath, layered over a blood-red lehenga skirt embroidered with tantric symbols. Her wrists clattered with oxidized cuffs shaped like serpents. Homage to Shiva's Nagendra. The piece de resistance, a bindi of obsidian, reflecting the magazine's tagline, Shiva Vogeshkov, where darkness meets Dharma. "Lean into the contradiction," Klaus urged, snapping shots, as Shakti posed atop a prop stone lingam. "You're not playing a goddess. You are her punk, power, and all." The Temple Street reaction. Back at Pranaya's stall, a group of college students clustered around the magazine. "Isn't this, like, blasphemous?" whispered Annika, her henna'd fingers hovering over Shakti's fishnet sleeves. Pranaya shook her head. Parvati once turned herself into a warrior to match Shiva's ferocity. This girl's just wearing her strength differently. She tapped the cover. "See her necklace? Those trishles? She's not mocking us. She's reinventing." The elderly priest shuffled past, paused, and squinted at the headline. "Shiva Vogeshkov," he read aloud, then chuckled. Kali Yuga indeed. But ellipsis points, she's got spirit." He bought 2 copies. Shakti's interview excerpt. Inside the issue, Shakti lounged on a Mumbai rooftop, sipping chai, her combat boots propped on a cushion embroidered with lotus flowers. On identity, "My mother's from Heidelberg, my father's a Punjabi Sikh. Growing up, I felt split. M-2 Indian for Germany, 2 Goth for the Gurdwara. But when I learned about Shakti, it clicked. She's the storm and the calm. So I dyed my hair black, embraced the aesthetic of the divine dark." Shiva's the ascetic, right? Well, ascetics wear ashes. I wear eyeliner. On the backlash, some say I'm appropriating. I say I'm participating. My Shiva Vogeshkov look isn't a costume. It's a bridge. Did you know Kelly's tongue is red from drinking the blood of demons? My lipstick's a tribute. On spirituality, I meditate before shoots. Not to chakras or mantras, but to the hum of subway trains. Shiva's everywhere and in chaos, in silence. Even in a mosh pit. The cultural fusion, the magazine's spread wove tradition into the avant-garde. In one shot, Shakti stood in a neon-lit alley, her shadow cast against a mural of Shiva's cosmic dance. The caption read, "Natarja meets New Deutsch Heart." Another page featured her in a batik print hoodie, graffiti behind her spelling Om Namah Shivaya in dripping spray paint. But the centerpiece was a diptych. Left side, a classical painting of Parvati meditating in the Himalayas, snow leopards at her feet. Right side, Shakti in a spiked collar, perched on a Berlin U-Bahn train, a stray dog napping beside her. The title bridged the divide, Shakti across ages, from sacred peaks to subway streets. The vendor's defense. By dusk, Pranaya had sold out. Only 1 copy remained, its cover slightly torn. A British tourist frowned at it. "Isn't this a bit ellipsis points disrespectful?" Pranaya gestured to the temple behind her, where Shiva's idol sat draped in moonlit marigolds. "See his ash-smeared skin? His serpent crown? He's the original nonconformist. That girl she pointed at Shakti's smoldering gaze, she's got his rebellion in her bones. Shiva Vogeshkov isn't a trend. It's a revival." As the tourist walked away, unconvinced, Pranaya tucked the last issue beneath her prayer rug. Let the goddess decide who deserved it. Epilogue. The aftermath. Weeks later, Shakti's Instagram post went viral. A selfie outside the same temple, her goth attire offset by the vermilion tilak smeared on her forehead. The caption, "Met my muse, number Shiva Vogeshkov." In the comments, debates raged, sacrilege versus she's the Kali of Gen Z. But beneath it all, a single thread emerged. Ancient symbols, remixed for a world where divinity wears fishnets and temples share sidewalks with fashion stalls. And in Pranaya's stall, the torn Vogue now hung framed beside Shiva's idol, its cover gleaming like an offering. Title: Shadows of Duty, A Homeland Chronicle. Claire Danes leans forward in her chair, her eyes flickering with the same electric intensity that made Carrie Matheson a cultural lightning rod. Carrie's always balancing on the edge of a knife, she says, voice low. One side is her duty, the other is her chaos. That's what makes her human. Across from her, Mandy Paddington, the soulful force behind Saul Berenson, nods. Saul's knife is sharper. He walks it for her, even when it cuts. This duality loyalty and betrayal, sanity and madness fuels Homeland's gripping narrative, a labyrinth of geopolitics and personal ruin. Nowhere is this more visceral than in Season 4's sprawling arc, where Carrie, Saul Paddington, and the Machiavellian Dara F. Murray Abraham collide across three fronts: the sterile halls of Langley, the dust-choked streets of Kabul, and the volatile heart of Baghdad. Act I, Langley's web stateside. Carrie is a hurricane in a pantsuit. Fresh off her disastrous tenure as Islamabad station chief, she's demoted to drone coordinator, her new domain a dim room lit by the ghostly glow of surveillance feeds. It's punishment, Danes explains, but also power. She's Achilles with a joystick. From Virginia, she directs MQ-9 Reapers over the Hindu Kush, their cameras zooming in on targets like godlike eyes. One misjudgment a wedding convoy mistaken for a Taliban caravan leaves 40 civilians dead. The backlash is instant, protests at embassies, senators demanding scalps. Enter Saul, now a private contractor, his beard flecked with gray. He meets Carrie in a DC diner, their rapport frayed but broken. You used to question the intel, he growls. Now you're just the Pentagon's trigger finger. Paddington, in a behind-the-scenes interview, muses, Saul still sees Carrie as his prodigy. But she's become what he fears a weapon without a conscience. Meanwhile, Dara Dal, played with chilling precision by F. Murray Abraham, lurks in Langley's shadows. He courted the Taliban once, now he eyes ISIS. Alliances shift, Dar tells a skeptical Marine general over Bourbon. Today's enemy is tomorrow's checkpoint guard. Abraham, grinning during a Vanity Fair roundtable, says, Dar is a cockroach. He survives, because he enjoys the dark. Act 2, Baghdad's Inferno. The story pivots to Iraq, where Saul navigates a maze of tribal leaders and CIA kibitzers. The U.S. Embassy in Baghdad's Green Zone becomes a pressure cooker and Marines in full battle ready patrol its blast walls, while Saul brokers a deal with a Sunni warlord. We are funding both sides of a civil war, he confesses to a junior analyst. It'll bite us. But not today. Carrie arrives, chasing a lead, an ISIS commander using refugee convoys to smuggle operatives into Syria. In a gritty rooftop scene, she interrogates a detainee, her voice oscillating between plea and threat. You think I'm afraid of hell? The man spits. I live there. Danes, recounting the shoot, laughs. I'd yell, until I was hoarse. The crew kept cough drops on standby. The embassy becomes a target. A suicide bomber, disguised as a Marine dog tags forged, uniform stolen, detonates at the gates. The blast kills 2 actual Marines. Gut punch moment filmed in haunting silence, save for the wail of sirens. Those deaths aren't just plot points, Paddington insists. They are the cost of hubris. Act 3, Kabul's gambit in Afghanistan. Dara Dal's machinations peak. He brokers a back-channel deal with a warlord, Haitham Haqqani, offering cash for intel on ISIS. The price? A U.S. prisoner exchange. A move that outrages Saul. You're trading terrorists, he snarls at Dar. You've gone full Rumsfeld. Abraham, ever the provocateur, defends his character. Dar's playing 4D chess. Morality's a luxury he can't afford. Carrie, now rogue, intercepts a drone feed showing Haqqani's convoy. Ignoring orders, she redirects the Reaper. Light em up, she orders, her voice flat. The Hellfire missile strike is a spectacle of fire and twisted metal. A victory that vaporizes Haqqani's air and radicalizes his followers. In the aftermath, Carrie confronts a Marine sergeant played by a veteran extra at Bagram Airfield. Was it worth it, he asks, his brother among the embassy dead. She has no answer. Epilogue. The cost. The season closes with Saul in Langley, staring at a memorial wall of fallen Marines. Dar sidles up, sipping coffee. You look like you've seen a ghost. We are the ghosts, Saul replies. Danes reflects, Carrie's tragedy is that she cares but not enough to stop. Paddington adds, Saul still believes in redemption. Barely. Abraham, ever cryptic, concludes, Dar, he'll outlive us all. As the credits roll, a drone's camera blinks over Kabul, a silent sentinel in a war without end. Title: The Gum Jabber. The air in the dimly lit chamber hung heavy with incense, tendrils of smoke curling around the austere figure of Deus Helen Moderum, Reverend Mother of the Bene Gesserit. Her aged hands, veined and steady, rested on a black box carved with glyphs older than the Imperium itself. Paul Atreides, 15 years old and sharp-eyed, stood before her, his mother Jessica's warning echoing in his mind, "This is a test of humanity. Place your right hand in the box," Moderum intoned, her voice a blade sheathed in silk. The gum jabber emdedge, a translucent needle tipped with metacyanide emdedge, glistened in her other hand, poised above Paul's neck. In the 1984 film, the scene throbbed with Lynch's surreal aesthetic. The box's geometric patterns pulsed like a living thing, and Moderum's hooded eyes glowed with otherworldly intensity. Paul hesitated, his duke's training warring with primal fear. The Bene Gesserit's breeding schemes, the millennia-old plot to create the Kwisatz Haderach emdedge, this moment was its fulcrum. Moderum's gaze pierced him. "You've heard of animals chewing off a leg to escape a trap? A human would remain in the trap, endure the pain, and feign death to kill the trapper. Control," Paul thought, echoing his mother's teachings. He slid his hand into the box. Agony. Fire lanced up his arm, worse than the books described emdedge, a synthetic nerve burn, a pain tailored to bypass human endurance. In the Lynch adaptation, the camera zoomed into Paul's contorted face, his breath hissing through clenched teeth, as orange light bathed the room. Moderum leaned closer, her voice a serpentine whisper. "You will die, if you remove your hand." The gum jabber ellipsis points is quicker. Paul's mind clawed for the litany against fear, the mantra Jessica had drilled into him: "I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer ellipsis points." But Moderum's presence disrupted his focus. Her mental probing, a Bene Gesserit skill, slithered into his thoughts like smoke. In Herbert's novel, this moment was a chess game of wills. In Lynch's film, it was a fever dream emdedge, visions of Arrakis, sandworms, and a golden path flickered at the edges of Paul's consciousness. "You think you know pain?" Moderum hissed, her face inches from his. "You are a child, a pawn in a game your father's house doesn't comprehend. The Harkonnens already move against you. The Emperor fears the Atreides rise. And you ellipsis points." Her lips curled. "You may not even be the one we sought." Paul's hand trembled. Flesh bubbled. The box's hum crescendoed, a sound Lynch rendered as metallic screams. Yet deeper than pain, Paul felt in emdedge the awakening. Visions cascaded, Channy's face, Stilgar's voice, a jihad bearing his name. The Kwisatz Haderach, he realized, is not just their tool. It's a storm. Moderum stiffened. Her Trofsei training detected the shift. "What do you see?" she demanded, the gum jabber trembling emdedge, a rare crack in Bene Gesserit composure. "You," Paul gasped, sweat drenched. "You ellipsis points and the sisterhood ellipsis points buried under sand. You fear I am your end." Her eyes widened. In the novel, this exchange was a quiet revelation. In the film, a thunderclap of prophecy. The Reverend Mother recoiled, her aura of invincibility shattered. For millennia, the Bene Gesserit had manipulated bloodlines, but now, facing the abyss of their own creation, Moderum understood the danger. Paul's pain faded, replaced by icy clarity. He withdrew his unscathed hand emdedge, the test was over. Moderum lowered the needle, her voice hollow. "You may be the one ellipsis points, but if you are, our order will not go." "You already have," Paul said, the Kwisatz Haderach's certainty hardening his tone. The scene mirrored Lynch's haunting visuals. Shadows draped Moderum like a shroud, as she retreated, her mission complete yet her certainty fractured. In the corridor, Jessica awaited, her face a mask of pride and dread. Moderum paused, glancing back. "Your son, Lady Jessica ellipsis points, is both more and less than human. The gum jabber should have killed him." Jessica's reply carried the weight of betrayal. "You underestimated the love of a mother." Moderum's laughter was bitter. "Love? A flaw the sisterhood excised centuries ago." Yet, as she vanished into the gloom, her gait betrayed unease. The Kwisatz Haderach's emergence appended the Bene Gesserit's plans emdedge. Paul was no puppet, but a singularity. In Herbert's mythos, this moment birthed the legend. In Lynch's hallucinatory frame, it was a sacrament of fire. Paul, cradling his hand, stared into the middle distance where visions of Arrakis loomed. The spice-rich world would test him further, but here, under Moharam's pitiless gaze, he grasped the reins of his destiny. The Reverend Mother's final words lingered like a curse: "Pray your human half survives what comes." But Paul Atreides was no longer just human. He was a storm-gathering Mdesh, and Moharam, like the sisterhood, would soon be swept into its path. Title: The Satchel March of Longhouse Farm. The mist clung to the moors like cobwebs, as dawn broke over Longhouse Farm. The stone farmhouse, its slate roof glistening with dew, stood sentinel against the rolling hills. 5-year-old Alfie Button stood at the wooden gate, his mother's camera aimed at him. Behind him, the farm's thick stone walls framed the only window still glowing with a butter-yellow light, and the kitchen, where his father was doubtless nursing a mug of tea. Alfie's uniform was a patchwork of British tradition: charcoal grey shorts with pressed creases, a navy blue blazer adorned with a crest of crossed quills, a hand-me-down from his cousin who'd outgrown the Haslingden primary school garb, and a mustard yellow jumper peeking beneath the blazer. On his head sat a brown Cub Scout hat, its brim slightly too large, threatening to swallow his tousled blonde hair. But the piece de resistance was the leather satchel slung across his shoulder, its strap digging into his collarbone with the weight of a pencil case, a cheese and pickle sandwich, and a conker he'd found that morning. "Stand straight, Alfie," his mother called, her voice warm but firm. Alfie puffed out his chest, mimicking the posture of the stone gargoyles he'd seen in picture books. The camera clicked, freezing the moment. A boy on the cusp of adventure, the moorland wind tugging at his hip, the satchel hanging like a knight's shield at his hip. "Right then," his mother said, tucking the camera into her apron. "Off you go. Remember to follow the footpath past Barker's field. And don't dally with the sheep." Alfie nodded solemnly, though his heart fizzed with excitement. The 3-mile walk to Haslingden Primary was a rite of passage for moorland children. He adjusted his satchel thump and began what he'd later call his satchel march, a rhythmic trudge down the gravel lane, the bag swaying against his thigh like a pendulum keeping time. The moors unfolded around him, heather brushing his knees, the air sharp with the scent of peat. Alfie's satchel bounced with each step, its contents clattering a sound he decided was properly heroic, like a soldier's drum. Thump thump, thump thump. He hummed a tune he'd heard his father play on the radio, something by /Dixie, though Alfie didn't know the words. It made the satchel march feel grander, as if he were leading an invisible army. Halfway down the lane, he encountered old Tom, the farmer who rented Barker's field. Tom leaned on a gate, chewing a stalk of grass, his border collie panting at his feet. "Off to conquer the world, are we?" Tom chuckled, nodding at Alfie's uniform. "School," Alfie said, adjusting his hat. "I'm to learn sums and ellipsis points and geography." "Geography?" Tom whistled. "You'll be navigating ships next. Mind that satchel doesn't pull you into a bog." Alfie glanced at the leather bag, now slung proudly over both shoulders. "It's my satchel march," he declared. "Like explorers do." Tom's laughter followed him, as he resumed his trek. The path narrowed, threading between dristone walls crusted with lichen. Sheep bleated in the distance, and Alfie resisted the urge to wave he was a scholar now, not a baby. The satchel strap chafed, but he refused to complain. Heroes didn't complain. Harry Potter hadn't complained when he'd faced dragons, had he? By the time the rooftops of Haslingden appeared, Alfie's cheeks were pink from the wind, his knees muddy from a stumble over a rabbit hole. The schoolyard buzzed with children, girls in pleated skirts, boys in identical blazers, all shouting and chasing like starlings. Alfie paused at the iron gates, suddenly aware of his smallness. His satchel march faltered. Then he spotted Emily Carter from the neighboring farm, her red plates bouncing, as she skipped rope. Emily saw him and grinned, revealing a missing front tooth. "Alfie Button, you look like a proper Londoner in that hat." "Do not," Alfie retorted, though he stood taller. The bell clanged, and the children funneled into the building. Alfie's satchel felt lighter now, as if the weight had been shared. In the classroom, Mrs. Higgins a woman with spectacles as thick as jam jar bottoms showed him to desk 7, next to a boy named Liam who smelled faintly of peppermints. "Open your satchels, children," Mrs. Higgins said. "We'll begin with spelling." Alfie unclasped his bag with reverence, laying out his pencil and conker like sacred artifacts. Around him, the rustle of paper and scratch of nibs filled the air. He sneaked a glance at the window, where the moors were a green-brown smudge on the horizon. Longhouse Farm was out there, waiting. At lunchtime, he sat on a bench beneath an oak tree, trading half his sandwich for a sticky bun. Emily plopped beside him. "Do you think we'll get homework?" "Hope so," Alfie said, mouthful. "Homework's what proper scholars do." The walk home felt longer, the satchel now stuffed with a primer book and a crumpled drawing of a sheep. The wind had turned bitter, slicing through his jumper, but Alfie didn't mind. He practiced his satchel march with renewed vigor, imagining himself as a general returning from battle. When Longhouse Farm came into view and smoke curling from the chimney, his mother's silhouette in the window, he broke into a run. Bursting into the kitchen, he slammed the satchel onto the table. "I did sums," he announced. "And geographies about rivers." His mother smiled, brushing a leaf from his hair. "And how was the march, Captain Button?" Alfie considered this. "Proper," he said. Then, after a pause, "But tomorrow, can I have an extra sandwich?" That night, as the photo of Alfie at the gate sat drying on the windowsill, the satchel lay by the hearth, its leather smelling faintly of adventure. Somewhere on the moors, a Carla called, and Alfie dreamed of conkers, spelling tests, and the relentless, glorious rhythm of the satchel march. Title: The Reflection of Envy. The stone castle loomed under a leaden sky, its turrets clawing at the clouds like skeletal fingers. Within its shadowed halls, the air was thick with the scent of beeswax and ambition. Tapers flickered in iron sconces, their trembling light casting grotesque shadows on the walls, and a dance of demons for an audience of one. Queen Isolde stood before her mirror, its gilded frame coiled with serpents carved from obsidian. She was a vision of calculated beauty, raven hair coiled into a crown of braids, lips stained the color of fresh blood, and eyes like shards of emerald ice. Her gown, black velvet threaded with silver, clung to her, as though it feared to displease her. She raised a hand, nails sharpened to talons, and traced the mirror's edge. "Mirror, mirror on the wall," she intoned, her voice a melody laced with venom, "who's the fairest of them all?" The glass rippled like a pool struck by a stone. Smoke curled within its depths, coalescing into a face not Isolde's, but that of a girl. Snow white. Her skin was pale, as apple blossoms, cheeks flushed with the rose of youth, and hair a cascade of night black waves. She stood in a sun-dappled glen, surrounded by deer that nuzzled her hands without fear. Innocence radiated from her like light through stained glass. The mirror's voice emerged, a hollow echo that seemed to rise from the earth itself. "You, my queen, are fair, 'tis true ellipsis points, but Snow White is fairer still than you." Isolde's breath hitched. Her reflection in the mirror wavered, the edges of her form blurring, as if the glass itself recoiled. She leaned closer, emerald eyes narrowing. "Lies," she hissed. "I've crushed rivals, brewed poisons, bathed in the milk of virgins. How dare she ambush? The heart untouched my shadow outshines even the stars," the mirror replied. "Her beauty is not one ellipsis points, it is born." The queen's fist struck the glass, but it did not shatter, and it never did. Pain lanced up her arm, a reminder of the pact she'd made, her soul for eternal youth. Yet here was Snow White, barely 14, her fairness unearned, untainted. A child who smiled at servants and sang to birds, whose very existence mocked Isolde's sacrifices. "Bring me the huntsman," Isolde commanded, her words slicing the silence. A servant scuttled away, eyes downcast. She paced before the mirror, her shadow a monstrous thing on the wall. Memories clawed at her, and a girlhood spent in a hovel, her own mother's face gone with hunger. Beauty had been her weapon, her escape. She'd climbed a mountain of corpses to sit on this throne. And now this ellipsis points, this child threatened to undo it all. The huntsman arrived, bowing low. His beard was flecked with gray, his hands calloused from slaughter. "Your Majesty." Isolde seized his chin, forcing him to meet her gaze. "Take the princess into the forest. Cut out her heart and bring it to me in a box of ivory." Her voice softened, a spider's caress. "Fail, and your own heart will feed the hounds." The huntsman paled but nodded. As he retreated, Isolde turned back to the mirror. Snow White's image lingered, her laughter a ghostly chime. The queen's reflection twisted beside it, a grotesque parody, and lips thinning into a gash, eyes hollowing into pits. She snarled, sweeping a taper from the wall and hurling it at the glass. The flame guttered out against the unmarred surface. You think her purity eternal? Isolde spat. I'll see her rot. Yet, as the hours bled into night, the queen lingered, ensnared by the mirror's truth. Snow White's face haunted her, not as a rival, but as a specter of all she'd sacrificed. The girl's fairness was a mirror of its own, reflecting Isolde's decay. When the huntsman returned at dawn, his hands shook, as he presented the ivory box. Inside, nestled on velvet, lay a heart still glistening, impossibly red. Isolde lifted it, her own pulse throbbing in her throat. Finally, she whispered. But as she raised the heart to her lips, the mirror shattered behind her with a scream. Shards rained like daggers, and in each fragment, Snow White's face smiled back, alive. Title: The Bow at Summit House. The Summit House restaurant in Fullerton loomed like a medieval keep, its stone facade weathered by decades of California Sunday. Inside, firelight from a roaring hearth danced across oak beams and leather booths, casting shadows that mingled with the murmur of Friday night diners. At a corner table near the fireplace, two figures sat in stark contrast to the rustic Americana. Sister Lynn May, a woman in a flowing white Mormon temple dress with a lace veil draped over her sleek black hair, and Elias Thorne, a Theoricus of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, his nemesis the black and white Egyptian headdress crowning blonde curls that framed icy blue eyes. Lynn's attire was celestial austerity, the dress's high neckline, the toga-style robe cinched with a silk sash, and white shoes polished to a bridal gleam. Elias's golden dawn sash, embroidered with zodiacal sigils, clashed gloriously with his partner's simplicity. Between them, two plates of braised lamb shank steamed, the meat falling from the bone in fragrant ribbons. You realize, Elias said, swirling his cabernet, this is the most heterodox supper of my life. His voice held a theatrical lilt, honed by years of ritual oration. Lynn adjusted her veil, her gaze steady. And yet here you are, Theoricus Thorne, breaking bread with a saint. Breaking bread? Lynn, this is lamb shank. The hierophants of Alexandria feasted on less. He gestured to his nemesis. Do you know how many initiates sneer at this headdress? Chef house rip of vow, they call it. As if mysticism and ellipsis points culinary theater share a lineage. Lynn's lips twitched. Your order's theatrics do remind me of a dinner show. Minus the tipping. The fire crackled, and for a moment, the restaurant's hum faded. A waiter in a crisp apron refilled their water glasses, eyeing Elias's regalia with poorly veiled curiosity. Nearby, a group of businessmen snorted into their bourbons, their glances flicking toward the pair. Lynn ignored them. She had spent a lifetime perfecting the art of quiet defiance. Elias speared a bite of lamb. Why meet here, of all places? Your temple's gardens would have been more private. This, Lynn said, nodding to the stone walls, the hearth's primal glow, is neutral ground. Sacred in its own way. Even your chef house rip of vow can't corrupt that. He laughed, sharp and bright. You've been listening to my lectures. I listen to everything. She sipped her herbal tea, the veil trembling. You called this meeting. Speak plainly. Elias leaned forward, the sigils on his sash catching the firelight. The order's archives mention a covenant a pact between light and shadow. It requires ellipsis points a union of opposites. His eyes flicked to her temple dress. A woman of unyielding faith. A man versed in the arcane. Lynn set down her cup. You want to recreate a ritual. Here. Now. The symbols align. The hearth he gestured to the fireplace is Vulcan's forge. The lamb, a sacrificial anchor. And this ellipsis points. He produced a small, onyx box from his robe. Inside lay two rings, one gold, one silver, entwined like serpents. A dual covenant. Forged under a chef house rip of vow. Lynn stiffened. The term, a jab at the Golden Dawn's penchant for appropriating ancient rites, suddenly fell to apartment. You're asking me to bind my soul to yours. In a restaurant. In a place where fire and stone hold no allegiances. Elias's levity faded. The veil you wear it's not just cloth. It's a threshold. My order could ellipsis points amplify that. Before she could reply, the chef emerged from the kitchen, his towering hat and white jacket gleaming. He paused at their table, wiping his hands on a towel. Everything to your liking? Divine, Elias said, holding up the lamb bone like a scepter. Tell me, Chef Mdaj, do you ever feel like a high priest? Sacrificing lambs to the gods of Yelp? The chef blinked. Just trying to keep the reviews above 4 stars. As he retreated, Lynn exhaled. Your humor is a defense. I see you, Elias. You're afraid this will work. He flinched, ever so slightly. And you're afraid it won't. The fire roared, as if fed by their tension. Around them, silverware clinked, a child giggled, and the stone walls seemed to lean closer. Lynn touched the onyx box. What happens, if we swear this ellipsis points chef house rip of vow? The ritual claims it merges 2 paths into a third. A way neither light nor dark, but beyond. Elias's bravado cracked, revealing a sliver of vulnerability. I've spent years deciphering this. You're the first person who hasn't laughed. She studied him. Mdaj, the gilded sash, the nemesis now slightly askew. A man playing wizard, yet earnest in his quest. A mirror, in ways, of her own disciplined devotion. We'll need wine, she said finally. Elias poured, hands steady. They clasped the rings, their fingers brushing. The vow, when they spoke it, was a hybrid of Elias's Enochian invocations and Lynn's temple covenants, words melting together like the lamb's marrow. My hearth and veil, my flame and stone, 2 paths converge to forge a throne. No chef house rip of vow, but true, bound in light Mdaj and shadows hue. The fireplace flared, embers spiraling upward. Diners gasped, some reaching for phones. The rings grew warm, then cool, their metals fused. When the light faded, Elias and Lynn sat and changed. Mdaj yet not. The air between them hummed, a third presence, fleeting but undeniable. Well, Elias said, voice unsteady, that's one way to skip dessert. Lynn tucked the fused ring into her sash, her veil hiding a smile. Next time, choose a restaurant with better acoustics. As they left, the chef stared after them, shaking his head. Tourists, he muttered. Outside, the California night buzzed with possibility. Somewhere between the stone walls and the stars, a new path unfurled. Mdaj, neither saint nor sorcerer, but something stranger. Title, The Celestial Chain. San Quentin's stone walls held the cold like a grave. In cell 14, Daryl standing lay trussed in a canvas straitjacket, the guard's latest improvement. Mdaj, a sodden, stinking cocoon cinched so tight his ribs screamed. The year was 1892, and the prison's jacket was designed to break men, not just bodies but minds. Yet Daryl had learned the trick from Moral. Mdaj Ed Moral, the old lifer who'd whispered secrets through iron bars, before they dragged him to the gallows. The body's a cage, son, Moral had rasped. But the mind ellipsis points, the mind's a key. Daryl's breath fogged in the cell's dank air. He focused on the mantra Moral taught him, inhale the stars, exhale the chains. The jacket's pressure became a drumbeat, his pulse a distant echo. Then Mdaj a snap, like a tender cut. His spirit arose, spectral and weightless, hovering above his shivering form. Below, the straitjacket lay slack, a discarded chrysalis. Above, the cell ceiling peeled away, revealing a kaleidoscope of epochs. First vision, the prairie, a sun-scorched plain materialized, wagons creaking westward. Daryl Mdaj, no, he was Elias now, a gaunt pioneer with a rifle. Mdaj scouted ahead. His daughter, feverish in the wagon, coughed blood into a handkerchief. Ellipsis points, the river's near, she pleaded. Elias smelled lies on his tongue. Tomorrow, sweetheart. The vision dissolved, leaving the taste of dust and despair. Second vision, the island salt stung his eyes. He was Koa, shipwrecked on an atoll, carving sows into palm trunks. Monsoon winds howled, and in their roar, he heard Moral's chuckle. You see? Life's just a different quintessence. Koa's fingers bled, as he scrabbled for shellfish, the horizon a turning flatline. Third vision, the void darkness, then Mdaj, a starship's humming cockpit. Captain Bay of the Chrysis, adrift in a nebula's womb. Alien hieroglyphs flickered on screens, untranslatable yet familiar. Moral would have loved this, they muttered, adjusting thrusters. A comet streaked by, its tail spelling mean tackle up Harson in celestial script. Back in cell 14, Daryl's body twitched, a fish on a line. The guards would come at dawn to hose him awake, but time bent here. Moral's voice slithered through the astral plane, they can't jail what they can't catch. Fourth vision, the gallows a flash. Mdaj, no, a memory. Moral's hanging, Darrell watched from the prisoner's pen, as the trapdoor dropped. But instead of snapping bone, Morrell's body vaporized, his laugh echoing. "You think this ends anything?" The crowd gasped. The warden crossed himself. The visions collapsed like a house of cards. Darrell's spirit sank back into the jacket's embrace, the cells chill a knife on sweat-slick skin. Yet he grinned. Morrell had been right. Every life, every death, was a thread in a tapestry vaster than San Quentin's walls. Footsteps clanged down the corridor. Still alive, standing, smeared guard combs, and locking the cell. Darrell met his eyes. Always. As the hose's icy jet hit him, he clung to the nebulous hum, the prairie's wind, the island's tide. They'd never break him. Not while Morrell's key turned in the lock. Title: The Primal Echo. The gas lamp sputtered on the nightstand, casting quivering shadows across the walls of Edward Wainwright's London townhouse. Sweat glued his linen nightshirt to his spine, as he jolted upright, his heart beat a war drum in the silence. Again, the dream the same jungle had yanked him from the threshold of sleep. He fumbled for his journal, ink splattering, as he scrawled, "Not a dream. A memory." But whose? Outside, fog swallowed the cobblestone streets, but Edward's mind still swung through a canopy drenched in equatorial heat. He closed his eyes, and the room dissolved. The dream dusk smeared the sky the color of bruised fruit. The lemurs clung to the caput tree, their fur silvered in the fading light. One juvenile dangled by its tail, chittering, as it batted at a moth. Below, shadows pooled and shifted, striped, sinewy, silent. Tigers. 2, perhaps 3, their ember eyes upturned. The alpha's muzzle twitched, catching the scent of fear souring the air. The lemurs knew. Their grip tightened on the branches, their communal breath stilled. To sleep was to risk falling. To wake was to invite panic. They existed in the liminal space, a Jungian monkey ballet of instinct and inherited terror. Edward no, he was not Edward here. Felt the collective pulse of the troop, as his own. His claws, when had he grown claws? Dug into bark. A growl rippled through the undergrowth. The tigers circled, patient, as tides. The awakening Edward gasped, his hand reflexively clutching the bedpost. The journal lay open to a sketch he didn't recall making, lemurs in a tree, tigers coiled beneath. His fingers trembled, as he traced the image. Racial memory, he muttered, the term borrowed from the controversial manuscript hidden in his desk on the phylogenetic psyche by Dr. Reinhard Krauss. The text, smuggled from Vienna, spoke of ancestral visions imprinted on the germ plasm. Krauss called it the Jungian monkey hypothesis, a primal self, shackled within the modern mind. The inquiry by daylight, Edward haunted the British Museum's archives. Between meetings with stuffy anthropologists, he scribbled notes. Lemurs Madagascar. Tigers Bengal. How conflict. Yet the dream's geography defied logic, blending species and continents into a primordial collage. "You look peaky, Wainwright," remarked Professor Huxley at the Royal Society Symposium. "Still chasing phantoms?" Edward forced a laugh. "Merely cataloging phantoms. Did you know Krauss posits that trauma echoes through bloodlines? That we recall prehistory?" Huxley snorted. "Krauss is a mystic. Next you'll cite Darwin's beard as proof of Atlantis." The return that night, the dream plunged deeper. Edward's claws were longer now, his muzzle pronounced. The tigers had multiplied, their snarls vibrating in his marrow. The juvenile lemur slipped, its tail unfurling like a rope. Edward lunged, grabbing its wrist paw. As the troop screeched, the tigers leaped, claws raking air. He awoke with a cry, his right hand, fingers curled, as if still gripping fur. The gas lamp revealed 4 parallel scratches on his forearm. Impossible. Yet there they bled. The revelation Krauss's manuscript crinkled under Edward's palms. Ellipsis points. The Jungian monkey is no metaphor, but a psychic organ, a fossil consciousness. When the self fractures in fever, madness, or the hypnagogic state the ancestral shadow emerges. Edward's hands shook. He penned a letter to Krauss, sealing it with wax. "I am both observer and subject. How to reconcile?" The convergence days blurred. Edward's waking hours grew spectral, the jungle gnawing at reality. He tasted termites on his tongue, smelled monsoon rain in the Thames's sludge. At the zoo, the Bengal tiger's gaze locked onto his, and he knew Mbadshah recognized the lemur in him. The unraveling the final dream erupted in violence. The tiger scaled the tree, claws shredding bark. The troop scattered, but Edward's lemur body froze, mesmerized by the alpha's roar and edge, a sound that predated language, fear, time. He woke screaming, the bed drenched in rainstorm sweat. Krause's reply lay on the floor: the Jungian monkey cannot be caged. You are the bridge. Burn this letter. The acceptance. Edward stood at the window, dawn bleeding into the fog. Somewhere, a tiger paced its cage. Somewhere, a lemur groomed its young. He smiled, sharp and primal. The scratches on his arm had scabbed into a ridge's embedge, a map, a covenant. He opened the journal one last time. We are not singular, but a chorus. I am Edward. I am the troop. I am the teeth in the dark. Beneath, he sketched a Lemurian figure with his own face, swinging forever beyond the tiger's reach. Title: The Potentate's Parade, Los Angeles, 1925. The neon glow of the newly erected Hollywood land sign bathed the city in ambition, but downtown, where the Angel's Flight Railway creaked up Bunker Hill, a different kind of spectacle brewed. Inside the Al-Malaikah Shrine Temple Moorish Revival Palace of onion domes and tessellated arches, Elias Easy Malone, the ceremonial potentate, adjusted his fez and glared at the chaos unfolding in the courtyard. His divan, a council of 6 red-fezzed nobles, bickered over the evening's parade route, while a troupe of acrobats practiced handsprings around them. Silence. Elias barked, slamming his ceremonial scimitar on a map of Los Angeles spread across a brass table. The Los Angeles Times called us the greatest show west of Coney Island. We're not losing that title, because you numbskulls can't agree on whether the elephants should march before the calliope. The divan straightened. J.P. Doc Whitaker, the temple's treasurer and a retired vaudeville magician, cleared his throat. Easy, the issue ain't the elephants. It's Big Tom Carson. Rumor is he's bribing cops to reroute us away from the $1 Million Theater. Wants his damn boxing match to steal our crowd. Elias smirked. Big Tom, a meat-packing tycoon with a grudge as thick as his neck, had been fuming since the Shriners Circus outdrew his prize fights last summer. Tommy boy thinks he's a Maharaja, Elias drawled, using the term like a curse. But this ain't his kingdom. We're taking Broadway, past the Biltmore, right under that Hollywood sign. End of discussion. By dusk, the Shriners Circus erupted across downtown. Floats shaped like genie lamps and golden pyramids rolled down Spring Street, trailed by a 40-piece brass band playing Yes, We Have No Bananas. Fire eaters from Tijuana spat plumes of flame as they passed Clifton's cafeteria, where starlets gaped from wrought iron balconies. But the crown jewel was Elias's marauding Maharaja act, a troupe of turbaned performers who rode camels down Olive Street, hurling caramel apples to children. Here Hawkham, Doc muttered, adjusting his fez, as he sidled up to Elias. But the crowd's eating it up. Elias grinned. Hawkham pays the hospital bills. The Al-Malaikah Shriners funded the city's only free pediatric clinic, a fact Elias never let the press forget. As the parade snaked toward Pershing Square, trouble struck. A flatbed truck carrying the Jungle Maharaja float a papier-mâché tiger surrounded by Ziegfeld-style dancers sputtered and died. The dancers hopped off, cursing in 3 languages, while Elias barked orders. Get the damn thing moving. We are blocking the damn Biltmore. Ain't no gas in the tank, boss, groaned Tiny O'Leary, the 300-pound strong man tasked with driving. Elias didn't believe in coincidences. He spotted Big Tom leaning against the $1 Million Theater's marquee, puffing a cigar. Their eyes locked. Tom tipped his bowler hat, smug as a cat. Back at the temple, Elias convened the divan. Madame Zelda, a retired silent film siren who managed the circus's lion tamer, sends actual lions Elias preferred theatrics to cruelty, slammed her fist on the table. Bet to get Maharaja Wanab's got a mole here. Howell said he know about the truck. Elias stroked his goatee. We'll leak a fake route. Doc, tell the boys we're diverting to Figueroa. Then, last minute, we pivot back to Broadway. And Zelda dust off the old disappearing act. Zelda's scarlet lips curled. The vanishing Maharaja? Darling, that's pre-war. Exactly. Tom won't see it coming. At 8 p.m., as searchlights crisscrossed the sky, the Shriners parade relaunched. The vanishing Maharaja float a tricked out Rolls-Royce Phantom with a hidden compartment led the way. When it reached Big Tom's blockade, a suspiciously timed sewer repair, the float split open, releasing a cascade of white doves and a squad of Shriner clowns who accidentally doused Tom's spoons in seltzer. The crowd roared. By 9 p.m., the parade reached the foot of the Hollywood Land sign, where acrobats formed a human pyramid under the moonlight. Elias, surveying the triumph, allowed himself a rare moment of pride. The clinic's debts would be paid. Still think you're a Maharaja? Doc teased, handing him a flask. Elias took a swig. Nah, just a ringmaster with a fez. The next morning, the Los Angeles Times headline declared, Shriners outweak Maharaja Indian, a spectacle for the ages. Beneath it, a photo captured Elias bowing atop the jungle Maharaja float, his scimitar raised, the Hollywood sign shimmering like a crown behind him. Somewhere downtown, Big Tom Carson shredded the paper and vowed revenge. But in the shrine temple, laughter echoed along with the clink of coins filling the charity coffers. Title: The Star and the Spear. The air inside the Masonic temple thrummed with the scent of myrrh and beeswax. 5 women stood at the points of a 20-foot star inlaid into the marble floor, their gowns rippling in hues of azure, ivory, crimson, emerald, and gold. At the star's heart, an altar pulsed with the light of a pentagram carved from electrum, its lines gleaming like liquid Sunday. The worshipful master, robed in midnight bloom velvet, raised his hands. Sisters of the Eastern Star, by Ada's fidelity, Ruth's devotion, Esther's courage, Martha's faith, and Electa's love, we convene A thunderclap split the silence. The temple doors burst open, and Boudicca of the Iceni rode in on a white stallion, its hooves striking sparks from the stone. Her hair, a wildfire of red gold, streamed beneath a bronze crown. Her cloak, stitched with the sigils of 100 Celtic clans, billowed like a war banner. The horse reared, its cry echoing, as she leveled her spear at the altar. Who dares summon the storm? The women did not flinch. The one in crimson Esther's avatar stepped forward. We invoke no storm, Queen Boudicca. We seek balance. Boudicca dismounted, her gaze sweeping the star. This is Roman trickery. Their stones, their geometry. Nay, said the woman in gold, Electa's heir. This star predates empires. It is a bridge between realms. The worshipful master approached, his voice a tempered blade. You were called, because you are both destroyer and protector. The Boudicca vouchsafe thou is needed. She stiffened. The phrase, spoken in the old tongue, stirred the ashes of memory, her daughter's broken bodies, the druid chants, as she sharpened her sword. What know you of my vows? We know you swore to shield the defenseless, said the woman in emerald, Martha's voice gentle as a spring. As we swear to heal. A vision flooded Boudicca's mind the Eastern Star's light piercing time, showing her a future where women in these same colored robes tended plague victims, sheltered refugees, defied tyrants. Her spear tip lowered. Speak plainly. The worshipful master gestured to the pentagram. Kneel at the altar, and we shall bind your vow to ours. I kneel to no one, she growled, yet the star's pull was undeniable. It mirrored the Celtic Triskelion, the eternal turn of life, death, rebirth. Not to us, urged the woman in azure, Ada's resolve stealing her tone. To the Boudicca vouchsafe thou the oath that outlives blood. Boudicca's stallion nudged her shoulder, its breath warm. She remembered the druid's prophecy, you will fall, but your vow will rise. With a snarl, she strode to the altar, her shadow merging with the pentagram's glow. What would you have of me? Lay your spear upon the electrum, the master said. And swear by your ancestors. The weapon trembled in her grip then clanked against the metal. A hum filled the temple, the star's colors bleeding into a radiant white. The women chanted. By Ada's bond, Ruth's yield, Esther's wrath, Martha's shield, Electa's grace, Boudicca's flame, the Boudicca vouchsafe thou we reclaim. The queen's scars burned, as if freshly carved. She saw her own reflection in the altar not the ravaged warrior, but a queen crowned in starlight. Thy ellipsis points I vouchsafe this vow, she rasped. To shield the helpless, though the heavens fall. The temple shuddered. The pentagram's light erupted, painting the dome with constellations unknown to Rome or Britain. Boudicca's stallion whinnied, its form dissolving into mist. It is done, the master said. Your vow is woven into the star. When courage falters, your spirit will rise. Boadicea stumbled back, her spear now cool, inert. The women bowed, their crowns glinting. "Why?" she demanded. "Why bind me to your symbols?" Esther's avatar smiled. "Because tyrants return, and queens who refuse to kneel ellipsis points make splendid ghosts." As dawn bled through the stained glass, Boadicea faded, her form unraveling into motes of light. The stallion's echo lingered a final, defiant whinny. The worshipful master gathered the spear, placing it crosswise on the altar. "Rest well, Stormbringer. We'll need you." And in the centuries that followed, on nights when the eastern star burned brightest, whispers rode the wind, the Boadicea vouchsafed vow, carried on the hooves of a ghostly white horse. The Peach Traveler of Marrakesh. The sun hung low over Morocco, casting the world in a honeyed glow, as if the very air had been steeped in ember. On the outskirts of Marrakesh, where the Atlas Mountains whispered to the desert, a woman stepped onto the dusty road. She moved with the grace of a film star from another era, her features sharp yet softened by time, a face reminiscent of Vanessa Redgrave in her prime, all cheekbones and knowing eyes. A floppy brown sun hat shaded her face, its brim trembling in the warm breeze. Behind her stretched a lush grass lawn, an improbable emerald oasis amid the arid landscape, where palm trees swayed like drowsy sentinels. Her outfit was a study in precision, white Mary Janes polished to a gleam, knee-high stockings clinging to her calves, and a peach hood ensemble skirt that brushed her knees, a matching tailored jacket, and a belt cinched at her waist. The color mirrored the horizon, as though she'd stolen a fragment of the sunset. In her left hand, she carried a small white suitcase, its hard shell gleaming. In her right, a larger one, equally pristine. A white leather purse hung from her shoulder, swinging gently as she walked. A beige 1940s station wagon idled nearby, its chrome grille catching the light. The driver, a local in a faded jalaba, leaned against the hood, smoking a cigarette. But the woman's gaze lingered beyond the car, toward the Kasbah rising behind it, a fortress of ochre stone, its Islamic arches and geometric mosaics glowing like a mirage. It was a place out of time, where the past pressed insistently against the present. Vanessa Redgrave was in Morocco. She had arrived 3 days prior, ostensibly to scout locations for a film about Berber poets. Rene Richards, the tennis star turned ophthalmologist, was here too, though his purpose was murky. A holiday, he'd told the press, though the way he lingered near the Kasbah shadowed alleys suggested otherwise. The woman in peach knew this. She had read the gossip columns, the society pages. Knowledge was currency in Morocco, where secrets pooled like rainwater in hidden courtyards. As she crossed the road, the Shriners emerged. 4 men from the Al-Malaikah temple, clad in fezzes and ill-fitting suits, stumbled out of a taxi. They had come to Morocco, they'd explained to anyone who asked, to research furniture for their divan throne for some arcane ritual and to gather ideas for their patrol, a term they used with solemnity, though its meaning evaporated under the North African Sunday. "I told you, Harold," one wheezed, mopping his brow, "we should have hired a guide who speaks English and Arabic. Or at least knows what a divan is." "It's a sofa, Leonard," snapped Harold, adjusting his fez. "A fancy sofa. And we need it to withstand ellipsis point ceremonial vigor." The woman in peach glanced at them, her lips twitching. She knew their type, well-meaning, baffled, trailing chaos like confetti. They'd likely return to Los Angeles with a rug, a hookah, and no divan at all. "Pardon me, ma'am," Leonard called out, trotting toward her. "You wouldn't know where a fellow could find ellipsis points royal grade upholstery?" She paused, considering. "Try this out in the Medina," she said, her voice low and melodic. "Ask for Abdelatif. But don't pay more than 200 dirham for camel hair." The Shriners blinked, scribbling notes on crumpled paper. The Kasbah loomed closer now, its gates studded with iron. Vanessa Redgrave was inside, the woman knew. She'd seen her that morning at the Riad, sipping mint tea in the courtyard, her silver hair loose, her laugh echoing off the Zellige tiles. Rene Richards had been there too, his tennis racket grip still evident in the way he clutched his espresso cup. They were waiting for someone or something. The woman in peach intended to find out. Her luggage felt heavier now. The small case held letters, sealed with wax. The larger one, a collection of artifacts, a brass compass, a journal bound in saffron leather, a photograph of her mother standing in this very spot, decades ago, wearing the same peach suit. The purse carried a passport, a vial of jasmine oil, and a key to a room at La Mamounia, where the bougainvillea crawled up the walls like eager lovers. As she reached the station wagon, the driver stubbed out his cigarette. "Mektub?" he asked. Destiny. A customary greeting here, where fate was both questioned and embraced. "Mektub," she replied, sliding into the back seat. The engine coughed to life. That evening, beneath the sky streaked with indigo, the woman stood on the terrace of La Mamounia. Vanessa Redgrave leaned against the balustrade nearby, swirling a glass of fig wine. Renee Richards lurked by the potted palms, eyes darting. The Shriners, sweaty and triumphant, hauled a rolled-up carpet into the lobby, shouting about patrol logistics. The woman opened her small suitcase, revealing the letters. One bore Vanessa's name, another, Renee's. The last was addressed to the Al-Malaikah Temple, care of Harold and Leonard. Inside, a single line, "The divan is not a sofa." She smiled. Morocco thrived on mysteries, and she had just added another. Somewhere in the Kasbah, a muezzin began the call to prayer, his voice weaving through the heat. The palm trees sighed. The peaches of her outfit deepened to gold in the twilight, and for a moment, she was not a traveler but a figment of the land itself. A secret Morocco had decided to keep. Wings and darkness. The Colorado sky stretched endless and blue above Front Range Air Force Base, its vastness broken only by the distant sawtooth peaks of the Rockies. 15-year-old Ethan Cole gripped the yoke of the T-41B Mescalero, his palms damp inside his gloves. The single-engine Cessna, painted in military gray, hummed like a tuned instrument beneath him. 3 touch-and-go landings down, 1 to go. His instructor's voice crackled in his headset. "You're clear, Cole. Bring her home." Ethan exhaled. The far-written exam had been a beast. Aerodynamics, weather patterns, navigation charts, but this was freedom. The plane kissed the runway, bounced lightly, and soared again. For a moment, weightless, he grinned. "I did it. Solo." The Cole house sat at the edge of Aurora, a brick ranch with a porch swing and a lawn littered with toy rockets. Ethan's boots crunched gravel as he jogged up the drive. Inside, the smell of rosemary and roast beef wrapped around him. His sister, Lily 10 going on 25, crouched on the living room carpet, building a Lego spaceship. His brother, Max 7 and perpetually sticky, aimed a foam glider at her head. "Guess who just soloed?" Ethan announced, dangling his flight log like a trophy. Lily squinted. "Did you crash?" "No." "Then why's your face all red?" Max logged the glider. "Did you see fighter jets?" Their father, Dan a former Air Force mechanic, emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on an apron that read "Kiss the Cook." "Well?" Ethan handed him the log. Dan's eyes flicked over the instructor's signature. For a man who'd rebuilt F-16 engines, he looked oddly emotional. A tabloid. Mom, Sarah, hugged him, her perfume a cloud of lilacs. "Dinner's at 6. And no flying talk till dessert." The Sunday roast was ritual: garlic potatoes, carrots glazed in honey, beef so tender it fell apart. Lily debated the merits of Pluto's planetary status. Max smeared gravy on his shirt. Dan raised his glass. To Ethan. "Next stop, wings pinned on your chest." Later, sprawled on the couch, Lily hijacked the TV remote. "Movie night. Legend. The one with the devil guy?" Max whispered. "His name's Darkness," Ethan said. "And he's not the devil. Just ellipsis points a devil." "Same difference," Dan muttered. Sarah dimmed the lights. "Your Lucifer movie home tradition," she teased, using Lily's term for their occasional dive into 80s fantasy. The screen flickered to life. Tom Cruise, as Jack, all leather and bravado, racing through a misty forest. Lily curled under a blanket. Max hid his eyes when Darkness appeared. Tim Curry's voice booming, crimson skin gleaming, horns twisting toward the ceiling. "Why's he so red?" Max peeped. "Because he's angry Pluto's not a planet," Lily said. Ethan elbowed her. "It's makeup. And puppets. They didn't have G back then." "Still scarier than your landings," Dan said, winking. The movie synth score swelled, as Darkness tempted by Sarah's princess with eternal night. Ethan's mind drifted. He imagined his T-41B soaring over those storybook clouds, chasing not goblins but cumulus. Real life was better, wasn't it? This is your second Lucifer movie home night this month, Sarah noted during a popcorn refill. Third, Lily corrected. We watched The Witch last Friday. That was a documentary, Max said solemnly. By the film's end, even Dan admitted Curry's performance was genius. Guy deserves an Oscar for walking in those hooves. Upstairs, Ethan found Lily waiting in his doorway. You're really gonna be a pilot? That's the plan. She frowned. What, if you get lost? I've got charts. Radios. It's not like the movie. Darkness didn't have radios, she conceded. Just ellipsis points glitter. At midnight, Ethan lay awake, the afterimage of red-skinned demons fading. Down the hall, Max's nightlight glowed. Real darkness wasn't a thing with horns, he thought. It was engine failure over mountains. Ice on wings. Silence on the radio. But today had been sunlight and asphalt and the perfect arc of a climb. He texted his instructor, thanks for not letting me crash. The reply came fast, you did that yourself. Sleep. Flight physical Monday. As the house creaked, Ethan replayed the touchdown wheels meeting earth, the shudder of becoming grounded again. He'd carry this feeling, he knew, longer than any Lucifer movie home scene. Epilogue. Years later, Lieutenant Cole would navigate sandstorms over Kandahar, his F-16 a comet in the dark. But when his niece asked about his first solo flight, he'd describe the T-41B, the Colorado sky, and the night they'd watched a Red Devil on TV. Was darkness real, she'd ask. Nah. But the fear was. And the part where the light wins. She'd blink. Did it? He'd think of Lily, now an engineer, and Max, a climate scientist battling bigger demons. Every time, he'd say. And for once, he'd be right. Title: The Peas, the Castle, and the Owl Shadow. Beneath the moonless sky in Moravia, the spires of Bauzow Castle clawed at the clouds like skeletal fingers. Built in the 14th century, its Gothic arches and moss-stained walls had long fueled whispers of vampiric hauntings. Tonight, the rumors felt alive. A greenish glow pulsed from its barred windows, as if the stones themselves breathed. Bats wheeled above the turrets, and wolves howled in the distant woods, not the howls of beasts, but of something older, hungrier. In 1865, Gregor Mendel, the Augustinian friar and future father of genetics, tended his pea plants in a monastery garden just 50 miles from Bauzow. By day, he tracked dominant and recessive traits, scribbling notes that would redefine biology. By night, he listened to travelers' tales of the castle. They spoke of a nobleman who'd barricaded himself inside during the Black Death, emerging pale and gaunt, with a thirst only blood could quench. Superstition, Mendel muttered, yet he noted the parallels, traits hidden, then revealed. Heredity, he thought, is a language even vampires might obey. By 1942, Moravia was a Nazi protectorate. The Third Reich, obsessed with occult power, sent SS units to Bauzow. They'd heard rumors to not of vampires, but of a genetic anomaly in the local bloodlines. Aryan purity, they preached, yet they sought something darker. In the castle's depths, they found a crypt sealed since the plague. Inside, skeletal remains with elongated canines, and a manuscript in Old Czech. The blood remembers, it warned. The SS officer in charge laughed. Science will make it ours. Meanwhile, in California's Bohemian Grove, a different kind of ritual unfolded. Billionaires and politicians, draped in robes, circled a 40-foot stone owl. They burned an effigy called Care in a paganisque spectacle. As flames licked the owl's blank eyes, one at the end a steel magnate with ties to Igfarb and toasted, two secrets that bind us. None knew of Bauzow's crypt, but power, whether chemical, genetic, or mystical, was their common creed. The convergence. Mendel's ghost haunted the castle. Not literally though the friar had died decades earlier but in the Nazis' stolen notes. His pea plant charts lay beside the crypt's manuscript. A junior officer, Carl, pieced it together. The castle's vampire was likely a man with porphyria, a blood disorder Mendel's work might have explained. But the SS saw only a weapon. Imagine, Carl wrote in his diary, soldiers who fear no pain, who heal like beasts ellipsis points. One midnight, as Carl translated the manuscript, the castle's green glow deepened to violet. The wolves fell silent. In the crypt, the skeletal jaws seemed to grin. The blood remembers. In Moravia, resistance fighters had also heard the rumors. A local botanist, Anaya, whose grandfather had studied with Mendel, infiltrated the castle. She found Carl's notes, Mendel's legacy perverted into a eugenic madness. "You don't understand what's here," Carl spat, aiming his lugger. Before he could fire, a shadow moved a figure with sunken eyes and a tattered noble's coat. The crypt vampire? No. A resistance fighter in a gas mask, rigged with phosphorus. "Care to meet real fire?" he growled, igniting the manuscript. Flames erupted, consuming centuries of fear and Nazi ambition. Epilogue. The castle still stands in Moravia, its stones scorched, its crypt a tourist curiosity. Mendel's P's are immortalized in textbooks. The Bohemian Grove's owl still stares, and blinking, as elites burn their doubts. But sometimes, on foggy nights, locals swear Bowsod's glow returns not green or violet, but blood red. A reminder, science can illuminate or destroy. Power can lift or consume. And in the shadows, whether of castles, labs, or redwood groves, the past whispers. The blood remembers. The Phoenicia Paycheck Book. Beneath the wind-worn pillars of a temple half buried in the sand, a man in crimson robes studied an ancient scroll by the light of a flickering oil lamp. He was known only as the archivist, but in his youth, he had been called Hiram not the Hiram, but a namesake, chosen by a secret brotherhood to follow in the path of the widow's son. Around his neck hung the 14th degree ring, heavy and dark with age, engraved with the ineffable name in forgotten characters. Its weight reminded him constantly of the vow he had taken. Hiram had come to Tyre not for war or trade, but to fulfill a cryptic task. The Grand Master of the East, a figure clothed in shadow and incense, had whispered it to him during the ritual of his final elevation. "Seek the Phoenicia Paycheck Book. When you open it, you will be paid your wages in wisdom." He had laughed at first. What sort of mystic document had a name so mundane, so mercantile? It sounded like a merchant's ledger. But the deeper he descended into the forgotten rites of the chapter, the more he realized its power. The Paycheck Book was not made of paper and ink it was a ciphered compendium of all the ancient crafts, metallurgy, navigation, theurgy, and the sacred language of the builders. It had been guarded, so it was said, by the widow's son himself, and lost after the first temple fell. After years of searching across Alexandria, Byblos, and ruins only named in forbidden scrolls, Hiram finally uncovered the stone vault beneath Tyre's collapsed ziggurat. Inside, a copper box held together by twin bands shaped like a robberoi the serpent eating its tail. In the center, a seal of purple glass still shimmered in the dark. He broke the seal with his ring. Inside was a codex bound in faded bull hide. The title etched into its first leaf read, Phoenicia Paycheck Book. As he turned the pages, the room filled with a faint hum like wine moving through a bone flute. The letters rearranged themselves, revealing instructions for lost arts: how to twist fire into glass, how to harmonize vowels to call down lightning, how to roll the tongue in the dialect of the sea wind what later would be known as rolling the R's, a talent of step-born tribes and priestly Phoenician tongues. There were diagrams of Hiram's own tools the square and compass but inscribed with star maps and symbols that shimmered only when the pages were tilted in a certain angle to the lamp. He realized this was no mere ritual ledger. This was a map of the architectonic logos the word before words. In the following days, Hiram transcribed copies in ciphered form, embedding the knowledge into symbolic motifs for later rites. In the York Rite, he crafted the image of the chapter penny to include the stylized sails of Phoenician ships, hidden in the chevron. In the Scottish Rite, he designed the 18th degree jewel to reflect not only the cross and the rose but also the flame-tongued sigil of Melkart, the Phoenician guardian of kings and masons. The Brotherhood would think them mere emblems of moral virtue but they were locks, and Hiram had the key, the Phoenicia Paycheck Book. One day, an aspirant named Asaph a young mason with bright eyes and an ear for tongues came to him and asked, "Master, I have memorized the tracing boards. I have studied the histories. I have climbed the degrees. But when will I be paid my true wages?" Hiram handed him a ring and said, "Only when you can hear the R that rolls like thunder and speaks without voice. only when you can read a ledger without ink. And with that, he showed him the codex. Asaph gasped. This is it? The legendary Phoenicia paycheck book? Hiram nodded. Read it aloud. The language will change, as you do, until it sounds like the voice in your soul. The words tumbled out like water over marble, first harsh, then mellifluous. Asaph stumbled on the consonants, rolled the R too stiffly, and at last, after much effort, the air shifted. The ring on his finger grew warm. The lamp dimmed not because the oil ran out, but because the room no longer needed light. And then, they both understood. This was not a book of wages, but of debts, the debt humanity owed to the old gods, to the builders, to the craftsmen of Tyre and Ugarit, to the wine-born people whose sails had once kissed every coast from Punt to Albion. And as the centuries passed, Hiram's body became dust, but the codex endured. Every time a worthy was raised in the lodge and asked for the wages of a master mason, the whisper echoed faint, like the flutter of ancient parchment. Phoenicia paycheck book. Not gold, not silver, but fire, and form, and the word. Visualization. The Praneos of Hammurabi. Imagine walking slowly into the Praneos the forecourt of a Rosicrucian temple. The air is thick with incense, cedar and frankincense. Pillars shaped like bundled wheat stalks rise around you, symbolizing the Neolithic Revolution the dawn of agriculture. Beneath your feet, tiles form an ancient pattern of oxen yoked to plows, tracing lines that mimic irrigation canals the soul of Sumerian farming. At the center of the Praneos stands a mighty bronze Brahma bull, not Indian, but Sumerian in spirit stylized, with coiled horns and adorned in lapis lazuli and carnelian beads. It snorts once, then turns to reveal a carved yoke of gold, beside an obsidian plow. This is the spirit of agriculture, as law where the furrow is a sentence, and the grain is just as sown in the earth. Behind the bull is a stone ark of the covenant, shaped in the York-Rite manner carved from cedar and plated in gold leaf. The mercy seat atop the ark is opened, revealing not just 2 stone tablets, but 3. The central one is black basalt the coat of Hammurabi, taller and more severe than the rest, bearing the phrase an eye for an eye in cuneiform. To its sides are the more familiar 10 Commandments in Paleo-Hebrew the Moshe Stel and the Law of the Desert. Now you hear a soft chant, Lagash, Lagash, Gudea, Gudea. A niche opens in the wall, and there sits Gudea of Lagash, the priest king, carved in diorite, cross-legged, holding a tablet on his lap. He smiles at you a gesture carved from both stone and eternity. His presence in the Praneos suggests that Gudea is the first keeper of Hammurabi's memory, a predecessor of sacred kinship. Now look to the temple's rear. A ziggurat rises impossibly high inside the room, reaching toward the heavens. Upon its summit stands a priest in white, arms raised to Shamash, the sun god and god of justice. Lightning flickers above him, but instead of thunder, you hear syllables like sacred bell chimes, ham mu ra b. He intones the syllables again. Ham like the hamstring of a bull, symbolic of restraint and power. Mu like the mu of the Brahma bull, but also the mu for name in Sumerian, suggesting renown. Ra the sun, or the divine fire of justice, here a link to Shamash, but also evocative of Ra of Egypt, a solar resonance. Be like be, as in to exist, to decree. It is the being of law, spoken into existence. Hammurabi's name becomes a sentence in itself. The restrained power Ham whose name mu shines with divine justice Ra and exists as living law be. Now, step closer. You notice that each level of the ziggurat bears an agricultural tableau. The bottom level shows a man sowing grain law begins in the earth. The second level shows the grain being measured justice requires balance. The third level shows a scribe recording names law preserves memory. The fourth level shows a man and woman bringing their case before a judge law arbitrates human affairs. At the summit, a golden throne, Shamash hands the law to Hammurabi. The image is reflected downward in a mirrored floor as above, so below as if the temple itself is a mnemonic mirror of Mesopotamian cosmology. The Phoenician-style script on the ark reads, "The law is the plowshare of civilization." And upon the mercy seat itself, the name is written 4 times. Hammurabi, 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 Hammurabi. And beneath each, a bull for Ham, a name tablet for Mu, a sun disk for Ra, A scroll of decrees for B. Question mark. How to use this visualization for memory. Link the name to the symbol. Each syllable has an image. Ham bowl. Mu name / tablet. Ra sun god. B legal scroll. Walk through the pranayas in your mind whenever you want to recall Hammurabi. Start at the plow and the bowl. Touch the ark with the law tablets. See Gaudiya presiding nearby. Climb the ziggurat to the priest and divine fire. Anchor his significance. Hammurabi codifier of justice. Gaudiya precursor priest king. Law agriculture plus divine authority. Temple memory palace of civilization. A light in the shadow of the temple. In the stillness of a starlit night near Bethlehem, a small, rough stable stood apart from the flickering lights of the city. Inside, under a roof of thatched straw and beams of olive wood, a woman named Mary rested beside a feeding trough filled with hay. Her newborn child, swaddled in cloth, lay cradled gently within it. Beside her, Joseph her husband watched the child sleep, his heart filled with reverence and awe. Above them, a star brighter than any other held its place in the eastern sky. Its light was strange piercing, and linking drawing the attention of travelers from far lands. 3 men robed in silk and crowned with knowledge arrived from the east. Guided by dreams and ancient scrolls, they had followed the star across deserts and mountains. In their hands, they carried gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh, tributes to a king who would not reign with iron but with mercy. Around the manger, the breath of animals steamed gently in the cold night air and an ox, a donkey, sheep gathered near. Their stillness was a kind of reverence. Even the beasts, it seemed, knew that something holy had entered the world. Yet not far away, on the hill above the valley, another palace brooded beneath the stars. King Herod's palace was no stable. It was a monument of cruelty draped in splendor. Built atop a fortified temple complex, it glowed not with divine favor, but with an eerie, unnatural light green like sour metal, red like blood, and purple like bruised flesh. Its shadow crawled across the countryside like a stain. Herod was a Jewish fatherly Herod in title only. Though his robes bore the symbols of Judea, his heart was that of a Roman puppet and a paranoid tyrant. His decrees were absolute, his suspicions endless. When whispers of a newborn king reached his ears from the lips of the Magi, his mind darkened with fear. In his eyes, the birth of Jesus was not a miracle, it was a threat. And so Herod issued a mandate. This edict, proclaimed by torchlight in the marketplaces and synagogues of Judea, declared that every male child under 2 years of age in Bethlehem and its surrounding districts was to be slain. It was a cold, calculated strike massacre, not for justice, but for fear. Thus began the massacre of the innocents. Swords flashed in the moonlight. Mothers screamed. Fathers fought and fell. Soldiers in black and crimson cloaks dragged babes from cradles, while Herod watched from his temple palace, the green-red-purple glow illuminating his twisted smile. The cries of the dying echoed off his marble walls, but he heard only the sound of threats dying. Herod's temple was a mockery of the divine. While Mary nursed her son beneath a roof of straw, Herod sat beneath columns of polished stone, built to rival Solomon's, but devoid of spirit. His holy place had no work, no mercy seat, only wealth, weapons, and fear. This was the palace of death, not life. The 3 wise men, warned in a dream, did not return to Herod. They slipped away silently by another road. Joseph, too, was warned in sleep by an angel's voice, take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt. Herod seeks the child to destroy him. So Joseph rose in the night, packed what little they had, including the Phoenicia paycheck book given in jest by one of the Magi, and fled into the desert shadows. Years would pass. Herod would die a slow death, infected and cursed by his own paranoia. His palace would crumble, and his line would fall into obscurity. The light of the star would fade, but the memory would not. And still the Phoenicia paycheck book sat tucked within the folds of Mary's worn garments, a token, a reminder of the gifts of kings and the price of innocence. She would sometimes turn its cover in her hands and remember the strange men, the glow of the star, and the eyes of Herod beneath his crown of shadow. In time, the child would grow and challenge not only kings but the empires of the soul. He would teach beneath fig trees, walk upon the waters, and weep for a world trapped in fear. He would not build temples of stone, but of spirit. He would bring a sword, not to kill, but to divide truth from falsehood. and in the end, he too would wear a crown but not of gold. Yet in that manger, all of this was only potential a flicker of hope against the backdrop of cruelty. A single flame against a vast night. And Herod's palace? It was swallowed by time. Its glow faded. Its marble cracked. But the story of the manger, the gifts, the star, and the escape lived on. The fourth time Mary opened the Phoenicia paycheck book, she saw a scrap of parchment tucked inside a scribbled note from one of the Magi. The temple of darkness always falls, but the light born in a manger never fades. Title: The Keeper of Aegean Whispers. In a secluded grove, where the Mediterranean breeze carried salt and secrets, Melissa stood amidst the ruins of an ancient temple. Olive trees whispered around her, their leaves shimmering like silver under the sunday. The air hummed with the music of bees, their golden bodies darting between wild thyme and cyclamen. Here, time folded like the tides, and Melissa whose name meant honeybee in the old tongue moved as both guardian and myth. Centuries ago, when gods warred and mortals carved legends into stone, she had been an nymph of Crete, nursing the infant Zeus in a hidden cave. With honey from her sacred combs, she nourished the future king of Olympus, her laughter echoing, as his tiny fists clutched her ember-dusted hair. The bees, even then, had been her kin. They taught her the alchemy of flowers, and she, in turn, taught shepherds to coax sweetness from hives without wrath. Melissa, they'd named her, a title that became her soul. Now, the temple columns weathered but stubborn framed her like a relic. She wore a chiton spun from spider silk and sunlight, its hem trailing over thyme blooms. Her fingers, stained with pollen, brushed a beehive nestled in a cranny of stone. The bees whirled in approval, their dance a language only she understood. They remembered what mortals had forgotten, the old rites, the prayers to Demeter for bounty, to Artemis for purity, to Persephone for cycles unbroken. Melissa, she murmured, invoking the priestesses who once chanted here. Their voices had risen with the smoke of burnt honeycomb, their bodies adorned with waxen charms. They were gone now, their vows swallowed by time, but their essence lingered in the drone of wings. A rustle broke the rhythm footsteps. A young man emerged from the trees, his tunic dusty, eyes wide with awe. He bore a clay jar, cracked and empty. They say the bean nymph of Caria dwells here, he stammered. That she reads fate in honey. Melissa tilted her head. Mortals rarely found this place, the grove hid itself from profane eyes. Yet here he stood, a thread in the loom of necessity. She beckoned him forward, and he knelt, offering the jar. What do you seek? Her voice was the whisper of wings. My village points the blight. He swallowed. Our crops wither. Our children sicken. The priests blame the gods' anger. She studied him the sweat on his brow, the tremor in his hands. Fear, but no guile. Plucking a honeycomb from the hive, she let golden rivulets fill the jar. The earth is not angry, she said. It grieves. You felled the sacred groves to build your ships. Demeter's roots bleed. The man flinched. Can you points mend it? Melissa closed her eyes. In her mind, the future enspowled like silk. She saw parched soil, a maiden sowing barley under a blood-red moon, a hive split into warring swarms. The visions of Caria's Ceres surged through her a gift or curse from Apollo himself. Plant poppies at the field's edge, she instructed. Let the earth rest every 7th year. And tell your people the bees are not slaves. They are witnesses. He nodded, clutching the jar like a lifeline. As he turned to leave, she added, when the rains come, return. Bring a branch of olive, not an axe. Alone again, Melissa wandered to the cliff's edge, where the sea kissed the sky. Salt spray misted her face, and she smiled. Once, she'd been a story a nursemaid to gods, a teacher of hives. Now, she was a voice in the wind, a keeper of balance. The bees wove a crown around her, their helm a hymn to forgotten things. In the temple shadow, a new blossom unfurled, its nectar glistening. Melissa breathed deep, her name echoing in the drone of wings, the sigh of waves, the rustle of leaves. 4 times woven into the world's tapestry, yet eternal, as honey in stone. The gods might fade, but the bees remembered. And so would she. Title: Static and Sand. The sun hung like a hammered brass plate over Kandahar, its heat rippling off the cracked clay earth. Outside the wire a Firebase Viper, a sizable Humvee idled in the dust, its diesel engine a low growl beneath the hiss of radios. The vehicle crouched like a mechanical scarab, its roof studded with antennas, a satellite dish tilted skyward, and enough encrypted gear to bankrupt a small nation. Inside, the 81st Airborne's mobile comms team sweated through their uniforms, ears glued to headsets. Anything on 162.550? Sergeant Cole barked, squinting at a spectrum analyzer. Specialist Rivera, her fingers dancing across a keypad, shook her head. Just chatter about a goat market in Sangin. Wait click no, lost it. Corporal Finch, the youngest, smirked, as he tuned a secondary receiver. Sizable Humvee FM's got better intel anyway. He adjusted the dial, and suddenly, the stifling cabin filled with the twang of a country ballad from Alabama. Ellipsis points rainin' in Mobile, 40 degrees and fell in ellipsis points. God's sake, Finch, Cole muttered, but didn't stop him. Let the kid have his station. The mission was to monitor every frequency and dash militia UHF, Taliban walkie-talkies, even the nostalgic bleed of stateside FM. It all mattered. Intel could hide anywhere, a pop song's pause, a preacher's rant between static. They called themselves Ghost Team 6, a joke no one laughed at. Their Humvee was a rolling vault of secrets. Satcom rigs hummed beside old-school HF radios, decrypting enemy Morse, while streaming coast-to-coast M. Today, the sizable Humvee FM-Finch's pet project M-had locked onto a classic rock station out of Colorado. Hendrix's purple haze now dueled with the whine of a Predator drone's feed in Cole's headset. Contact. Rivera snapped. Pashto dialect, grid 38 kilo. Talking about night visitors and a truck. Cole relayed the coordinates to the Firebase. Somewhere beyond the berm, a Marine platoon would pivot, rifles raised. Finch kept one hand on his keyboard, the other tapping the beat to Born in the U.S.A. blaring from his speakers. The dissonance was routine. War didn't pause for Springsteen. At dusk, the sizable Humvee FM found a blues show. Muddy Waters crooned about Rolling Stones, as Rivera isolated a cell phone frequency near Argandab. Suicide vest, she translated coldly. 2 men. Mercedes sedan. Cole's jaw tightened. Get that tweeted. Now. Finch, unplugging his O-cord, muttered, they're playing Stormy Monday ellipsis points mom's favorite. For a second, the cabin stilled. The bluesman's ache threaded through the adrenaline, a needle-pulling memory. Then the satellite dish beeped, and they returned to work. Midnight. The Firebase's floodlights cut swaths through the dark. Inside the Humvee, Cole sipped tepid coffee, monitoring NATO logistics traffic. Rivera slept upright, her head set askew. Finch, ever the night owl, scoured FM bands. Whoa. Check this out, sizable Humvee FM just hit a gold meme. He patched a signal through the speakers, a Cleveland sports talk show debating the Browns draft picks. Ellipsis points absolute garbage offensive line ellipsis points. Ellipsis points but the defense Defense my ass. Cole snorted. Make that a jamming signal. We're at war, not a damn tailgate. Finch grinned. Sarge. It's cultural reckon. If the Hadges invade Ohio, we'll know their weak spots. The joke landed like a dud mortar, but Cole let it slide. Let them have this. Let the Humvee's steel walls hold the madness at bay. By 0400 the team was punch drunk. Static fused with exhaustion. Then, Rivera stiffened. Incoming. VHF burst Russian made. Grid 42 Foxtrot, moving fast. Cole slapped the alert button. Finch, kill the noise. The cabin plunged into silence, as Finch killed the FM feed. Headsets buzzed with panicked Pashto. Ellipsis points they know. Turn back. Cole relayed the intercept. Minutes later, artillery boomed in the hills. When the fire mission ended, Finch flicked the radio back on. A pop diva's auto-tune vow to never let you go oozed into the void. Sizable Humvee FM's back online, he announced, too loudly. No one replied. The team stared at their screens, riding the edge of the adrenaline crash. Somewhere, a family in a Mercedes sedan no longer existed. Somewhere, a Browns fan slept unaware. The Humvee's radios hummed on, stitching together a world where all signals led here and to sand, and static, and the fragile lie of control. Title, Summer Stakes on Cypress Lane. The yellow house at the end of the cul-de-sac gleamed under the June sun, its shutters peeling just enough to hint at its 1980 origins. The lawn, a carpet of emerald green, sloped gently toward the sidewalk where a croquet set lay scattered white wire hoops planted in the grass, wooden stakes marking the course, and 4 mallets leaning against a maple tree. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and charcoal from a neighbor's grill. It was 1985, and the Wilsons were mid-game. "No way, that's a legal swing, Danny." Emily, the 10-year-old, jabbed her mallet at her 15-year-old brother, who stood smugly beside his blue-striped ball. "You totally stepped on the wicket." Danny rolled his eyes, his Walkman headphones dangling around his neck. "Says who? The croquet police?" He mimed a rockster guitar riff with his mallet, nearly whacking the stake. Their father, Mark, chuckled and adjusted his aviator sunglasses. At 38, his blondish brown hair was already salt and peppering, but he swung his mallet like a pro. "Em's got a point, Dan. Foot faults count." He nodded to the youngest, 7-year-old Ben, who was busy poking a dandelion with his mallet's handle. "Your turn, buddy. Show us how it's done." Ben snapped to attention, gripping his child-sized mallet with both hands. His tongue poked out in concentration, as he lined up his red ball. The family held their breath. Ben's turns usually ended in chaos. With a grunt, he swung. The ball veered left, ricocheted off a tree root, and rolled point straight through the first wicket. "Yes." Ben threw his arms up, mallet soaring. His mother, Lori, lunged to catch it before it clocked Emily in the shoulder. "Nice one, Benny." Lori grinned, her own hair sun-streaked brown pulled into a messy ponytail. At 38, she still moved like the college soccer star she'd been, sidestepping Danny's discarded bike to take her shot. Her ball clacked against Emily's, sending it spinning toward the roses. "Mom!" Emily wailed. "All's fair in croquet and war," Lori said, winking. The game meandered like the summer breeze. Danny abandoned his sulk to help Ben perfect his swing. "Dude, choke up on the handle." Emily plotted revenge, whispering strategy with Lori. Mark manned the lemonade pitcher, refilling Dixie cups between turns. The cul-de-sac was quiet, save for the thwack of mallets and the occasional shout of BRB as someone pedaled past on a BMX bike. By the 5th wicket, the stakes rose. Emily, trailing by 2 points, squinted at the course. "What if I points?" She aimed her pink ball at Danny's green one, calculating the angle. With a clean strike, she sent his ball sailing into the next yard. "Oh, come on." Danny threw his hands up as their golden retriever, Duke, bounded after it. Lori high-fived Emily. "That's my girl." Ben, now bored, plopped onto the grass and began braiding dandelions into a crown. "Croquet's kinda boring," he announced. "Says the kid who nailed 3 wickets in a row," Mark said, tousling his hair. The showdown came at the final stake. Lori and Danny were neck and neck, while Emily's ball languished near the hydrangeas. Even Ben rejoined, lured by the promise of push-up pops from the freezer. Danny wiped sweat from his brow, eyeing the 15-foot shot to victory. "Pressure's on, Dad." Mark smirked. "Age before beauty, son." He adjusted his grip, tapped his ball and overshot, landing it inches past the stake. "Oof. Grandpa status," Danny teased. He lined up his shot, the family crowding around. Crack. The ball rolled, slowed points and stopped a hair short. "No." Danny groaned. Lori stepped up, mallet steady. Her ball kissed Danny's, edging it aside, then tapped the stake with a decisive clink. "Mom wins." Emily crowed. Ben tossed his dandelion crown onto Lori's head. "All hail the Queen." As dusk painted the sky peach, the Wilsons sprawled on the lawn, sticky with lemonade and triumph. The croquet set lay forgotten, mallets abandoned in the grass. Danny strummed a Def Leppard riff on a tennis racket. Emily braided Duke's fur with daisies. Mark sighed, content. "Remember this, when you're all too cool to hang with your old man." "Never," Ben said, flopping onto his lap. Lori smiled, watching fireflies blink to life. The yellow house glowed behind them, its cracks and creaks invisible in the twilight. Somewhere down the block, a screen door slammed, and a parent called kids inside. But on Cypress Lane, summer stretched eternal. A mallet swing, a dandelion wish, a family etched in gold. Title: Lucky Spills at Chumash Gold. The Chumash Gold Casino hummed like a hive under neon lights. Eddie Carson, a 40-year-old with straw blonde hair and a 5 o'clock shadow, slumped at a one-armed bandit named Desert Mirage. His third bourbon coffee blend of the night a sloshing paper cup labeled Chumash coffee sat precariously on the machine's edge. The brew had spilled twice already, leaving a sticky brown Rorschach blot on the screen. Just like my luck, he thought, jabbing the spin button. Cherries. Bars. A lone 7. The reels clattered, indifferent. Eddie's eyes flicked to his coffee cup, now half full. The coffee Chumash spill gleamed under the casino's garish lights, a cunning Rorschach blot. He'd driven 2 hours to this reservation oasis to forget the divorce papers, the layoff, the way his ex kept the dog. Oof, someone's thirsty, purred a voice silkier than the slot's jingles. Eddie turned. An exotic dancer glided past, her platinum curls rivaling his own. Ostrich feathers swayed from her sequin bikini, each step a choreographed storm of glitter and skin. She winked, her perfume cutting through the cigarette haze. Bet a new slot strategy? Baptize the machine? He glanced down. The coffee Chumash spill had spread, dripping onto his jeans. Ellipsis points beginner's luck? She laughed, a sound that made the quarters in his pocket feel lighter. Keep pouring, cowboy. Maybe it'll pray for you. Then she was gone, swallowed by a pack of rowdy bachelorettes. Eddie exhaled. The machine beeped a $20 win. He let it ride. 2 spins later, a waitress in a fringed vest paused, eyeing the mess. Another Chumash coffee, hon? On the house, if you let me wipe that up. Eddie shook his head. The coffee Chumash spill was his now, a companion in ruin. I'm good. He nursed the warm dregs, watching the dancer reappear near the roulette tables. She trailed fingers over sailors' shoulders, laughed at jokes Eddie couldn't hear. Her feathers brushed a high roller's tuxedo, leaving gold dust on black lapels. For a wild moment, he considered cashing out, following her. But the slots hissed again clang 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 and 3 silver bells aligned. Jackpot, the machine trilled, flashing like a disco seizure. Eddie froze. The screen blinked $1,500. Around him, a smattering of applause. The dancer turned, arched a penciled brow, and blew him a kiss. A floor manager arrived to verify the win. As Eddie signed paperwork, he noticed the coffee Chumash spill had dried into a Rorschach shape that now looked ellipsis points triumphant. A phoenix? A middle finger? Either worked. Celebrating with a drink? The waitress reappeared, sponge in hand. Nah. Gotta drive. He pocketed the voucher, stood and faltered. The dancer stood 5 feet away, adjusting a feather. Leaving so soon, Belle's hero? Her smile revealed a chipped tooth, charming as a crack in Vegas marble. Eddie gestured to the stain. Gotta quit, while I'm ellipsis points. Ellipsis points sticky? She grinned. Smart man. For a heartbeat, he lingered. She smelled like vanilla and sweat, a far cry from his ex's Chanel. Then a drunk frat boy called, "Hey, Dolly. Dance for us," and she rolled her eyes. Duty calls, she sighed, though her voice held steel. Don't spend it all on redemption, Blondie. At the cashier, Eddie folded the crisp bills into his wallet. The casino's doors hissed open, releasing him into the desert night. His car sat alone under a sodium lamp, its hood still warm. As he drove off, he glanced back. Through the tinted glass, he glimpsed her perched now on a slot stool, sipping from his abandoned coffee Chumash spill cup. He laughed, sudden and loud. The highway stretched ahead, dark but navigable. Somewhere, a dog waited in a cramped apartment. Somewhere, a phoenix dried on a machine. Somewhere, a woman in feathers turned his luck. Eddie turned up the radio, humming. The coffee stain on his thigh felt like a tattoo. Title: The Violet Confidence. The rooftop gala sparkled under strings of fairy lights, the city skyline a dusky canvas of amber and indigo. Claire adjusted the hemline of her violet peplum dress, the 2-tiered skirt flaring just above her knees. White piping traced the seams like frost on a midnight bloom, and her white pumps clicked softly as she stepped from the elevator. She'd chosen the dress for its boldness and a rebellion against her usual muted blazers. But now, under the gaze of champagne flutes and sequined gowns, the hemline felt too short, the purple too vivid. Stunning, a voice said. Clara turned. A woman in emerald silk appraised her, gaze lingering on the dress's scalloped hemline. Vivian Westwood. Vintage, Clara admitted, smoothing the peplum waist. Found it in a boutique on Orchard Street. It's alive, the woman replied before vanishing into the crowd. Clara exhaled. The compliment warmed her, but her fingers still brushed the hemline, ensuring it lay flat. It's just fabric, she told herself. Yet it wasn't embedge, it was armor. At the bar, a man in a navy suit sidled beside her. Whiskey sour, please. He glanced at her dress. You're here with the gallery? The charity, she corrected. I'm on the board. His smile didn't reach his eyes. The peplum's a nice touch. Retro, but ellipsis points risky. His gaze dipped to her hemline. Brave choice for a board member. Clara's cheeks burned. Bravery's relative. Some of us don't hide behind navy suits. He stiffened, but she was already walking away, the hemline swaying with each step. Near the terrace, she paused. Below, the city pulsed embedged cars like distant fireflies, a siren's wail. She leaned on the railing, the night air cooling her pride. Nice rebuttal. Clara turned. A woman with a silver pixie cut and a charcoal tuxedo jacket offered a flute of champagne. Evelyn, she said. I run the lighting here. Clara. She accepted the glass. And thanks. I think. Evelyn nodded at her dress. The hemline's perfect embedge commands attention without begging for it. Art should balance people. Clara laughed, tension dissolving. You sound like my therapist. Better looking, I hope. They talked embedge art, music, the absurdity of galas. Evelyn's hands danced, as she spoke, her silver rings catching the light. When a jazz trio began playing, she gestured to the dance floor. Show that hemline off. Clara hesitated, then took her hand. The music swelled embedged saxophone, piano, a brush of drums. They spun, Clara's dress flaring, the hemline slicing the air like a violinist's bow. Evelyn's laugh was low and warm, her steps sure. For the first time all night, Clara forgot to check her seams. Mid-twirl, her heel caught. She wobbled, Evelyn steadied her, grip firm. You okay? Clara glanced down. The hemline had twisted, revealing a hidden stitch embedged, a flaw she'd missed. Just a snag. Evelyn knelt, straightening the fabric with care. There. Good as new. The gesture flustered Clara. You don't have to embedge. Why not? Evelyn stood, eyes glinting. Beautiful things deserve care. Later, on the terrace, they shared a cigarette, Clara's first in a decade. The moon hung full, a pearl in black velvet. Why the dress? Evelyn asked. Clara traced the hemline. I ellipsis points wanted to feel like more. Not just agendas and minutes. Evelyn nodded. My ex hated red. So I bought a crimson couch. Sometimes you got right in small ways. A waiter passed. Clara swapped her empty flute for water. And your tux? My rebellion's perpetual. They laughed, shoulders brushing. The city hummed below, a lullaby. At midnight, Clara stood alone by the elevator, hemline slightly frayed, pumps in hand. Evelyn had left with a scribbled number and a link. The dress hung lighter now, a second skin shed of its weight. In the taxi, she replayed the night embedged, the gawking, the dance, the snag. Not a flaw, but a footnote. She texted Evelyn, coffee tomorrow? The reply was instant, only, if you wear the dress. Clara smiled. The hemline had served its purpose. Title, The Sash of Seven Rivers. In the shadow of the temple of Artemis, where the Aegean winds carried whispers of forgotten gods, Leander tightened his sash embedged, a length of indigo linen woven with Ephesus's sigil, twin stags beneath a crescent moon. The sash had been his father's, a merchant who traded cedar and saffron from Anatolia to Alexandria. Now, it bound Leander's tunic, as he began his sash Ephesus journey Nile, a pilgrimage to the upper Nile's hidden shrines, where the river was said to speak in the tongues of drowned pharaohs. The road east unfurled like a dusty scroll. Leander walked alone, save for a donkey laden with figs, olive oil, and a clay jar of Ephesian wine embedged offerings for the river priests. By day, the sun blistered his shoulders. By night, jackals howled at the stars. He slept in caravanserais, where traders swapped rumors of bandits and mirages. Yet, whenever doubt gnawed at him, he touched his sash, its threads frayed but unbroken. A man's journey is measured by his resolve, his father had said. In Cappadocia, a one-eyed potter warned him, the desert beyond Tarsus eats men whole. Leander traded figs for a goatskin of water and pressed on. Sandstorms erased the horizon, and the sash became a compass. He tied it to his staff, letting the wind snap its indigo like a banner. When thirst clawed his throat, he whispered the mantra that anchored him, Sash Ephesus Journey Nile. At the edge of the Syrian desert, he met a woman with henna'd hands and eyes like smoked quartz. She rode a camel draped in crimson tassels, her laughter sharp as a falcon's cry. You seek the Nile's heart? She asked, nodding at his sash. Only the mad or the cursed go there. I seek answers, he replied. She poured him bitter tea from a silver flask. The river answers in riddles. But your sash ellipsis points, it smells of salt and old prayers. That might help. For 3 days, they traveled together. She spoke of her people, nomads who read fate in dunes, and taught him to find water in the bones of dead acacias. On the 4th morning, she was gone, leaving a scarab amulet in the sand. Leander tucked it into his sash and whispered, Sash Ephesus Journey Nile, as if the words could conjure her back. The Nile's delta greeted him with reeds and rut. Fishermen mending nets eyed his foreign garb but offered roasted catfish when he shared his wine. In Memphis, priests in leopard pelts tested him. Why does an Ephesian seek Sabac's secrets? Leander unspowled his sash, revealing glyphs his father had embroidered in gold, a map of stars aligning over the river. Because the water remembers what the land forgets. They let him pass. Upriver, the world narrowed. Papyrus forests hummed with flies, crocodiles slid like shadows through black water. At Philly's temple, a priestess with shaved brows bathed his feet in lotus oil. The river's voice is faint here, she said. Go to the second cataract, where the rocks bleed. His donkey died near Aswan. Leander walked on, the sash now a sling for his dwindled pack. When fever gripped him, he dreamed of his father's ghost wading into the Nile, the indigo fabric dissolving into the current. Sash Ephesus Journey Nile, the spectre intomed, until the words lost meaning. The second cataract roared like a beast. Leander climbed the basalt cliffs, his hands raw, the sash fluttering like a wounded bird. Below, the Nile churned, carving its eternal path. He knelt, poured the last of the Ephesian wine into the water, and waited. Sunset stained the river copper. A voice rose, not from the water, but the wind. You carry 7 rivers in your sash, it hissed. Ephesus's pride, the Oronce's spite, the Tigris's hunger ellipsis points, yet the Nile needs none of these. Leander unwound his sash, letting the wind seize it. The linen unfurled, a serpentine dance, before the current swallowed it. In that release, he understood, his father's journey had been a circle, not a line. The answers were not in the river's heart, but in the letting go. He returned to Ephesus with a new sash plain, and dyed and a story etched in silence. Travelers asked, what did the Nile say? He smiled. Sash Ephesus Journey Nile. Title, The Gathering in Malmo. The crisp autumn air of Malmo carried a whisper of salt from the Orison Strait, as the Californians stepped out of their taxi, their laughter mingling with the rustle of golden leaves. The Grand Lodge Conference, held once every decade, had drawn fraternal societies from every corner of the globe to this coastal Swedish city. For the delegation from the Grove a centuries-old lodge nestled in the redwood forests of northern California the trip was equal parts pilgrimage and curiosity. Malmo, with its sleek Scandinavian architecture and medieval roots, felt worlds away from their misty sequoia groves, but the promise of reconnecting with their international brethren hummed with familiarity. The conference was hosted in Malmo's historic town hall, a Gothic revival masterpiece whose spire pierced the overcast sky. Inside, the vaulted ceilings echoed with a cacophony of languages Japanese, Swahili, Portuguese and the clink of ceremonial pins being exchanged. Ethan Cole, the Grove's youngest delegate at 32, adjusted his lodge medallion, as he scanned the room. His mentor, Marcus Hale, a silver-haired historian with a penchant for tweed, leaned in. Remember, every handshake here is a bridge, he said. Even if they don't speak your language, they'll understand this. He tapped the compass symbol engraved on Ethan's ring. The first encounter came swiftly. A group of lodge brothers from Kyoto, their lapels adorned with cherry blossom motifs, approached with bows. Through broken English and gestures, they exchanged stories of initiation rituals the Californians' trials beneath ancient redwoods, the Japanese brothers' meditations in bamboo forests. But it was a trio from a Nairobi lodge, resplendent in vibrant mossy bedwork, who captivated the room. Their elder, John Owermu, recounted how his lodge had rebuilt schools after droughts, blending tradition with community service. The lodge is not a relic, he declared. It is a living root. As the day unfolded, Malmo itself seemed to breathe life into the gathering. During a luncheon at a waterfront restaurant, Ethan found himself seated beside Lars Engström, a Swedish brother whose family had belonged to Malmo's lodge since the 1800s. This city has always been a crossroads, Lars said, gesturing toward the Öresund bridge glinting in the distance. Vikings, traders, now us. We are keepers of stories and like your growth, no? He slid over a faded map of Malmo from the 17th century, pointing to a tiny symbol of an oak tree near the harbor. Your emblem, he grinned. A sign you were meant to come. The Californians soon learned that Malmo's lodge had arranged a twilight boat tour of the canals, a nod to the city's maritime heritage. As the vessel glided past illuminated buildings, delegates from Brazil struck up a folk song, their voices harmonizing with the splash of oars. Marcus nudged Ethan. See that? He pointed to a modern glass tower beside a half-timbered house. Old and new, side by side. That's what we're here to do and honor the past without getting stuck in it. But tensions surfaced the next morning. During a panel on preserving lodge traditions, a delegate from Prague argued vehemently against digitizing archives, calling it a desecration. The Grove's proposal to create a global online library of rituals and meant to foster unity and had sparked division. Marcus rose, his voice steady. A redwood doesn't survive by clinging to deadwood. It grows through it. If we let fear silence progress, we'll become relics ourselves. The room erupted in debate, but by lunch, a compromise emerged, a physical vault in Malmo's lodge, paired with a private digital network. The Swedes, ever pragmatic, offered their city as the nexus. Malmo bridges worlds, Lars said. Let it bridge ours too. On the final night, the delegates gathered in a candlelit courtyard behind the town hall. A fire pit crackled as brothers from each lodge placed a token into the flames and a redwood sapling from California, a Cumman arrowhead, a Swedish runestone. Ethan felt the weight of the moment, the centuries of secrets and solidarity crackling in the air. Later, as he wandered Malmo's cobblestone streets with new friends from Mumbai and Reykjavik, he paused beneath a street lamp. The city's mix of old-world charm and modern energy mirrored the lodge's dance between tradition and reinvention. At dawn, the Californians boarded their train, the Malmo Central Station bustling with goodbyes. Ethan glanced at his phone and a selfie with the Kyoto brothers, a contact list now spanning 6 continents. Marcus chuckled, flipping through a notebook of hastily scribbled ideas. Next decade, it's our turn to host, he said. Think the Redwoods can compete with Malmo? As the train pulled away, Ethan watched the city shrink on the horizon. Malmo had been more than a backdrop, it had been a catalyst, a place where roots intertwined across oceans. Somewhere, a new sapling was growing. Title: The Perfect Sun. The sun filtered through lace curtains into the immaculate kitchen of 1956 Willow Lane, where Danielle Whitmore stood ironing her husband's shirts. The scent of lemon polish hung in the air, and the chrome appliances gleamed. Perfection was Danielle's armor and edge against the neighbor's gossip, against her own gnawing doubts. But today, her 12-year-old son, Kim, had cracked that armor. He'd tracked mud across her freshly waxed linoleum. Again. Kimberly James Whitmore, she barked, her voice sharp as the crease in her apron. The boy froze in the doorway, his shoes caked with dirt, a baseball glove dangling from his hand. What did I say about using the back steps? I forgot, Kim muttered, staring at his feet. His voice carried a defiance that made Danielle's jaw tighten. Look at me, when I'm speaking to you. She set the iron down with a thud. You're not a barn animal. This house has rules. I have rules. But the game was ambush. But nothing. She cut him off, her tone icy. Go scrub the floor. Now. And when your father gets home, you'll apologize for disrespecting me. Kim's face flushed, but he obeyed, shoulders hunched, as he fetched the bucket. Danielle watched him kneel on the floor, scrubbing in sullen silence. Her chest ached and not with guilt, but with frustration. Why couldn't he just behave? Why did he always make everything harder? The next morning, Danielle intercepted Kim at the breakfast table. His hair was uncombed, his shirt untucked. Fix yourself, she snapped. You look like a hooligan. The guys are waiting, Dash. Let them wait. She adjusted his collar with rough hands. You're a Whitmore. Start acting like one. At school pickup, she spotted him laughing with friends by the fence, his shirt tail loose again. Rage coiled in her stomach. She rolled down the window of her Chevrolet. Kimberly, get in this car. Now. The boy snickered. One mimicked her shrill tone. Kimberly. Humiliation burned Kim's ears as he slid into the passenger seat. Danielle gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white. You think embarrassing me is funny? Let's see how you like it. That evening, she made him wear his sister's frilly apron to wash dishes, while she hosted bridge club. The women's laughter tinkled like broken glass, as Kim stood at the sink, tears mixing with soap suds. Danielle insulted Kim something fierce today, Mrs. Pearson whispered behind her teacup. Poor thing looks like a kicked puppy. The final straw came on Friday. Kim had failed a math test, a subject Danielle had drilled into him for weeks. She stormed into his bedroom, waving the crumpled paper. Is this a joke? A D? After all I've done? I tried, Trying isn't good enough. She tore the comic book from his hands. No more nonsense. You'll study every night. No radio, no baseball, nothing, until you're passing. You can't do that. Watch me. Her voice dropped to a venomous whisper. You'll never amount to anything, if I don't drag you there myself. At Sunday church service, Danielle's pride curdled, as Mrs. Fletcher remarked on Kim's slumped posture. Danielle insulted Kim all through supper last night, she told the choir director. Said he's lazier than their old hound dog. The rumor slithered through the pews, etching itself into the boy's skin. The breaking point arrived on a rainy Tuesday. Kim forgot to make his bed in Danielle's spotless universe. She marched him to the backyard, where she'd hung his sheets on the line. Strip, she ordered. What? You want to live like a pig? Wash them yourself. In the rain, neighbors peeked through blinds, as Kim stood in his undershirt, scrubbing linens in a tin tub. Danielle watched from the porch, her arms crossed. Maybe this'll teach you, she called. But when he finally came inside, shivering and silent, something in his eyes frightened her. A hollow look, as if he'd carved out the part of himself that cared. That night, she found a note under his pillow. Danielle insulted Kim today. And yesterday. And tomorrow too. The following week, Kim stopped speaking at dinner. He aced his math test but left the paper folded on Danielle's ironing board without a word. At the PTA meeting, Mrs. Fletcher remarked how well behaved he'd become. Danielle smiled, but the praise tasted bitter. In the quiet hours, she'd sometimes stand in his doorway, watching him sleep and his face soft, the anger washed away. She'd smooth his hair, whispering apologies he never heard. But by morning, the iron would hiss, the floor would shine, and the words would clot in her throat. Perfection, after all, had no room for regret. Title: The Forge of the Millstone. In the shadowed epoch of the Hyborian Age, when the earth was young and gods walked among men, the Cimmerian steppes birthed a boy who would become a legend. The world Robert E. Howard envisioned was one of clashing steel and primal sorcery, where barbarian kingdoms like Aquilonia and Nemedia rose like wolves from the mist, and dark cults worshipped serpents coiled around the throats of tyrants. It was here, amid the frost-beaten crags of Cimmeria, that Conan, son of a blacksmith, first learned the taste of ashes. Thulsadum's raiders came at dawn, their armor glinting like scales, their swords silencing the village with methodical cruelty. The warlord sorcerer king of the snake-worshipping Acheronians watched, as his Vanir mercenaries butchered Conan's parents and bound the boy in chains. The Hyborian Age scared no one, its savagery, least of all children. Sold to a scarred miller in the arid east, Conan entered a life of grinding monotony. The mill house stood atop a blistered hill, its wooden gears groaning under the weight of a stone larger than 3 men. The miller, a gaunt Zingaran with eyes like cracked flint, lashed Conan to the millstone each dawn. Push, boy, he'd snarl, or the rats will feast on your bones. The other slaves Gauls and Hyperboreans with broken spirits whispered that the millstone had once crushed a rebel king. Now, it crushed grain ellipsis points and boys. But Conan's Cimmerian blood refused to break. Seasons blurred, as he heaved against the stone, his sinews knotting into cables, his spine hardening to iron. The miller's whip split his skin, yet each scar became a covenant. I survive. By night, he stole scraps of bread and honed stolen knives against the mill's grindstone. By day, he transformed the agony of labor into raw power. The Hyborian age demanded strength, and the mill's tyranny forged Conan into a weapon. Howard's world thrived on contrasts: ancient temples crumbling beside pagan groves, chariots churning mud next to sorcerers conjuring storms. The 1982 film Conan the Barbarian mirrored this duality, blending practical grit with mythic grandeur. Director John Milius used no digital trickery. His Hyboria was built on sweat-streaked realism. The millstone sequence, shot in the Spanish desert, featured a teenage Arnold Schwarzenegger straining against a genuine stone slab. Crew members later swore they saw his veins bulge like ropes on a galley ship. The Vanir, portrayed by hulking bodybuilders smeared in animal fat, embodied Howard's vision of barbarian excess. Thulsa Doom, played by James Earl Jones, oozed malevolent charisma and his voice a velvet dagger, his cult's rituals a psychedelic haze of fire and flesh. The film's piece de resistance, though, was its reliance on physicality, real swords clashing, live snakes coiling around priestesses, and Schwarzenegger himself performing stunts that left him bruised but grinning. This was a world carved from stone, not pixels. A decade passed. Conan, now a titan with eyes like glacial ice, felt the millstone's rhythm in his bones. The miller had grown old and bitter, his cruelty calcified by fear. "You'll die here," he spat one evening, gesturing to the rotting mill. A slave's death. That night, a sandstorm raged. As the other slaves cowered, Conan slipped his rusted chains and seized the miller's throat. "I choose my death," he growled, "and yours." The man's neck snapped like dried kindling. Dawn found Conan striding east, a stolen axe at his hip. Behind him, the mill burned, its gears melting into a funeral pyre. Before him lay the Hyborian age in all its blood-stained glory, and a world where a slave could become a king, a miller's beast could become a god. Title: The Equation of Spring Break. The sun had barely risen over the Berkeley hills, but Ethan Carter's dorm room was already a battleground of numbers. Equations sprawled across the whiteboard like cryptic graffiti, his blue pajama sleeves smudged with dry erase ink. Spring break loomed in 6 hours, and Clara his red-haired, ever-impatient girlfriend had texted 3 times, "Don't make me leave without you." But Ethan couldn't budge. Not until he pinned up verified PJ's hi-fi a mantra he'd scrawled in the corner of the whiteboard to remind himself of the stakes. Translation: pin the final algorithm to the board, verify its integrity, all while clad in his lucky blue PJs, with Beethoven's Eroica symphoning courage through his vintage hi-fi. If he failed, Clara would drag him to Ocean Beach anyway, and his professor would flunk him for submitting half-baked code. Again. The hi-fi's walnut veneer hummed as the third movement crescendoed. Ethan glared at the whiteboard, marker captured to death. His project a machine learning model to predict tidal patterns had to be flawless. "It's just math," Clara had teased, when he'd explained it over Boba last week. "Real scientists use intuition." But intuition didn't cut it, when your dataset was 3 decades of NOAA reports and your code kept confusing kelp forests for stock market trends. A knock shattered his focus. Clara leaned in the doorway, her auburn curls haloed by hallway light. "You look like a deranged Picasso," she said, nodding at his ink-stained PJs. "I'm close," Ethan lied. "Just need to pin up verify PJ's hi-fi this last matrix." She rolled her eyes. "You've said that 4 times since Tuesday. This time, I mean it." Clara flopped onto his futon, smelling like sunscreen and impatience. "If we miss the tide, I'm dumping you for a surf instructor." The hi-fi switched to Shostakovich, strings sawing at Ethan's nerves. He attacked the whiteboard, circling variables, scribbling derivatives. Clara's presence usually sharpened him, but today her foot tapped an accusatory rhythm. Tick-tock, tick-tock. "Why don't you just run the simulation again?" she asked, peeling an orange. "Because it's not about the simulation," he snapped. "It's about proving the model's invariant under nonlinear perturbations. So ellipsis points, it's about ego. It's about rigor." She lobbed an orange slice at him. "Rigor mortis. Let's go live, nerd." By noon, sweat glued Ethan's PJs to his back. The whiteboard was a mosaic of breakthroughs and dead ends. He'd pin up verified PJ's hi-fi 3 times once after fixing a genvalue, again, when he'd reweighted the loss function, and a third time purely for superstition but the final proof eluded him. Clara, now painting her toenails coral, sighed. You know, in psychoanalysis, obsessive behavior like this don't. Is a cry for help. Ethan's marker squealed. You're the one who wanted to date a genius point. I wanted to date a human. You're like a Roomba with a superiority complex. The hi-fi spun to brums, its warmth doing nothing to thaw the room. At 2:07 p.m., it happened. Ethan stumbled backward, a laugh bubbling up from his gut. Clara, look. He gestured wildly at the board. The perturbation cancels under the Sobolev norm. Its ellipsis points, it's elegant. She squinted. So the numbers ellipsis points agree? They sing. Great. PJ's off, pants on. But Ethan was already snapping a photo of the whiteboard. Hold on. Gotta pin up verify PJ's hi-fi one last time. As he unveiled the proof to his professor, Clara yanked his marker from his hand. You're done. Even Mozart took bathroom breaks. The hi-fi played Vivaldi, as they dashed to her Volvo, Ethan still in his PJs under a hoodie. Ocean beaches, wine-whipped waves greeted them, the sunset bleeding gold into the Pacific. Clara spread a blanket, her hair flickering like a match flame. Told you we'd make it, she said. Ethan stared at the horizon, his mind still twitching with residuals. What, if I missed something? A rounding error, or Clara kissed him, salty and sudden. Shut up. You pin up verified PJ's hi-fi. Now be here. With me. The numbers quieted. For once, the world beyond the whiteboard was enough. Title: The Creek Beneath the Red Bridge. The morning sun filtered through the sycamores, dappling the surface of Willow Creek with flecks of gold. 11-year-old Jake Tanner adjusted his faded baseball cap, its brim frayed from countless adventures, and peered into the water. His Shakespeare fishing pole a hand-me-down from his dad rested against the red steel bridge, its strength 6-pound test line taut in the current. The MIPS Black Fury No. 3 spinner flashed silver and black beneath the surface, a tiny predator hunting rainbow trout. Jake had chosen his spot carefully, beneath the bridge's rusting crimson arches, where the creek deepened into a pool. The wooden floorboards above creaked occasionally, as cars rumbled past, but down here, it was a sanctuary. Cement sandbags lined the bank, stacked like soldiers to hold back erosion, and the air smelled of damp moss and iron. A kingfisher rattled from a nearby branch, but Jake's eyes were locked on his lure. Then he saw a small, quivering molehill erupting near the base of the sandbags. Soil spilled down the bank like a miniature landslide, and a velvety nose poked out, followed by dirt-caked claws. The mole emerged, blind and purposeful, tunneling upward, until it vanished into the roots of the willow. Jake grinned. Nature's engineers, his grandpa called them. Distracting me won't help, Jake muttered to the absent mole, though he kept glancing at the molehill, as he reeled in his line. The trout were skittish today. He'd had 2 nibbles all morning, both quick tugs that vanished, before he could set the hook. A breeze stirred the leaves, carrying the scent of warm pine. Jake repositioned himself on the sandbags, his blue jeans smeared with creek mud. He'd read online that rainbow trout loved turbulence, so he aimed his cast upstream, letting the black fury drift into the pool. As the spinner danced, something glinted in the water and a shadow darting from beneath the bridge. Patience, he told himself. Like Dad says, fish the water, not the wish. But patience frayed, as the sun climbed. Jake's stomach growled, and he thought of the peanut butter sandwich in his backpack. He was about to reel in, when movement caught his eye again, not in the creek, but on the bank. The molehill had grown, fresh soil mounding near the water's edge. The mole reappeared, this time dragging a writhing earthworm. It vanished into its tunnel, breakfast secured. Lucky, Jake murmured. He'd give anything for a bite that decisive. As if answering, his rod tip jerked. Jake's hands tightened, not a snag, and then the line zipped sideways. The trout surged downstream, the reel screaming. Heart pounding, Jake scrambled to his feet, nearly slipping on the sandbags. The fish leaped, its iridescent sides catching the light, and for a wild second, boy and trout hung in the air together. Jake breathed, easing the drag as the trout dove. He'd lost bigger fish by horsing them in. The Shakespeare rod bent like a willow switch, strand line humming. Slowly, steadily, he worked the trout toward the bank. Then disaster, the mole chose that moment to resurface. Its latest molehill collapsed, sending a cascade of dirt into the creek. The trout bolted at the disturbance, tearing line from the reel. Jake's pulse spiked. No, no, no. He braced the rod against his hip, fingers cramping, and prayed. Miraculously, the fish turned. Jake regained line inch by inch, until at last the trout lay gasping in the shallows. It was a beauty and edged 16 inches, if it was an inch, its pink stripe vivid as a sunset. Jake knelt, careful not to touch its gills, and removed the hook. The trout's gills flared once, twice, then it vanished in a flick of tail. Thanks for the assist, Jake said wryly, glancing at the molehill. The mole, of course, was gone. He sat back on the sandbags, adrenaline ebbing. The bridge cast a cool shadow over the water now, and the kingfisher returned, diving for its own lunch. Jake reeled in, the black fury spinning lazily. He'd pack up soon, maybe skip a rock or two, but for now, he let the creek's murmur wash over him. A rustle in the underbrush made him turn. The mole had reappeared, its snout poking from a fresh tunnel. Jake smiled. Yeah, show off. As he gathered his gear, he spotted one last molehill near the water's edge and a tiny monument to the morning's chaos. Jake snapped a photo with his phone, caption already forming, Assistant Coach Mole. 10/10 would fish again. The hike home was all sunlight and birdsong, the creek fading behind him. But Jake knew he'd be back. The trout were waiting. And so, he suspected, was the mole. The authoring of Sumerial Sergeant Neil Howe, his knuckles white on the steering yoke of the rattling seaplane, scanned the approaching coastline of Sumerial. Mist clung to the cliffs like damp wool, and the air, even at altitude, carried a scent of salt, damp earth, and something unsettlingly sweet and edge like overripe apples. He was the law, the representative of king and crown, summoned by an anonymous letter pleading for help finding a missing girl, Rowan Morrison. Duty, rigid and unwavering as his Presbyterian faith, propelled him towards this pagan enclave. From the moment his seaplane taxied into the harbor, the island felt wrong. The villagers' smiles were too wide, their greetings too hearty. Willow, the innkeeper's daughter, exuded a predatory sensuality that clashed violently with Howie's celibate convictions. The schoolteacher, Miss Rose, taught children unsettling songs about the rebirth of the land through sacrifice. And Rowan Morrison? No one seemed genuinely concerned. Her mother, a vacant-eyed woman named May, first denied Rowan's existence, then tearfully confessed she was dead. Yet the grave Howie forced open held only a hair and edge, a pagan symbol of fertility. The investigation became a maze of evasion, riddles, and blatant mockery. His rigid world fractured further when he witnessed the May Day preparations. Lurid murals adorned buildings, depicting copulation and harvest. Young maidens leapt naked over fires. The air thrummed with a primal energy that repelled and fascinated him. He sought answers from the island's lord, the urbane, unsettlingly rational Lord Sumerial. In the grand library, surrounded by botanical tomes and pagan artifacts, Sumerial confirmed Howie's darkest suspicions. The king's man arrives, seeking truth, Sumerial mused, swirling ember liquid in a crystal glass. But truth here is rooted deep, Sergeant. Deeper than your laws. Our apples, our lifeblood, failed last season. The soil demands appeasement. A sacrifice of great potency, a willing king, or a king's man, arriving unbidden, pure in his faith, and touched by woman. Howie recoiled. Sacrifice? You're mad. Where is Rowan Morrison? Rowan, Sumerial sighed, a chilling smile touching his lips. A necessary fiction, Sergeant. A lure spun from errant suggestion. We needed you to come willingly, driven by duty, that most potent of compulsions. We needed the perfect authoring. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced Howie's resolve. He bolted, a hunted animal fleeing through the twisted woods and moonlit fields. But Sumerial was vast, and its people were one. Nets snared him. Strong hands, dozens of them, pinned his struggling form. He was dragged, protesting, invoking the king's law and his Christian God, towards the headland overlooking the sea. There, silhouetted against the setting sun, stood the wicker man. It was colossal, a skeletal giant woven from thousands of thick rattan poles. 30 feet tall, its hollow form vaguely humanoid, with a massive, basket-like head and gaping chest cavity. It was a rattan effigy of terrifying scale and purpose, an ancient design dredged from pre-Christian nightmares. Torches flared around its base, illuminating the intricate latticework. "No! In the name of God!" Howie screamed, as they stripped him of his uniform, leaving him clad only in a simple white shift. He was a symbol now, stripped of his earthly authority. Rough hands lifted him, passing him up like a sack of grain into the gaping chest cavity of the monstrous structure. They bound his wrists and ankles to the internal framework. Below, the entire island seemed gathered, their faces rapt, chanting a low, rhythmic dirge. Lord Samariel approached the base, his voice carrying clearly in the hushed twilight. "Behold the vessel of our renewal. This rattan effigy is the conduit. Within its sacred lattice, the sacrifice burns, his essence rising to feed the weary earth." Howie looked down, terror contorting his face. "This is murder. Blasphemy. Blasphemy." Samariel countered, his voice chillingly reasonable. "Consider the deeper currents, Sergeant. The rattan, pliant yet strong, binds the sacrifice. It verifies the commitment. The effigy itself verifies the ancient pact. And the sacrifice, the ultimate offering. It verifies the cycle. Life demands life. It is the rattan verify Vishnushu of existence itself and edge the crushing tread of renewal upon the old, the necessary end for the beginning. Do you not see? Your purity, your very presence here, fulfills the rattan verify Vishnushu principle and edge the verification of sacrifice through the vessel, the shoe that steps upon decay to bring forth life. Your burning is the rattan verify Vishnushu that treads upon barrenness, compacting death into fertile ground. This wicker man is the final rattan verify Vishnushu, the ultimate verification of the sacred exchange." His words were esoteric madness, a perversion of meaning that slithered around Howie's understanding. "Vishnu? I am a Christian." "All gods are facets, Sergeant," Samariel said, stepping back. "Tonight, you serve ours." He raised his hand. Torches dipped towards the dry brush piled high around the base of the wicker man. The first flames caught with a hungry whoosh, licking up the rattan poles. Heat radiated upwards. Smoke, acrid and thick, began to coil around Howie's legs. He could see the faces below and edge not cruel, but expectant, fervent. They began to sing, a powerful, haunting harmony that rose above the crackle of the fire. It was a song of the earth, of seeds and sun and the blood that feeds them. Howie closed his eyes, not in prayer to his God, who felt impossibly distant on this unholy shore, but in a final, desperate act of defiance. He drew a ragged breath and began to sing. Not a hymn of praise, but the 23rd Psalm, his voice cracking but clear, rising against the pagan chorus. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." The flames climbed faster, consuming the lower layers of the rattan effigy. The heat became unbearable, searing his skin even through the shift. The structure groaned, as the rattan framework began to warp and blacken. Below, the villager's song swelled, drowning out his faltering sum. He saw Lord Samariel, face illuminated by the inferno, watching with serene satisfaction, as the wicker man became a towering pyre. As the fire engulfed the lower half of the giant rattan effigy, smoke billowed thickly into the chest cavity. Howie's singing turned to agonized coughs, then screams that were swallowed by the roar of the flames and the islanders' ecstatic chant. The colossal wicker man, now a blazing silhouette against the darkening sky, became a funeral pyre for law, faith, and a man who came seeking a lost child, only to find himself the cornerstone of a terrible, pagan harvest. The rattan verify Vishnushu was complete, the sacrifice verified, the barren earth awaited its sanguine baptism. The dawn mist clung to the dew-laden leaves in the hallowed grove, the private sanctuary of Lodge Number 17 of the ancient Free Gardeners. 3 figures stood in silent reverence before a weathered cedar wheelbarrow, its deep bed brimming with rich, dark mulch and edged a fragrant blend of aged wood chips, composted leaves, and well-rotted manure. They wore the distinctive regalia of their order, long, dark blue aprons that fell past their knees, far longer than their Masonic cousins' attire. Embroidered across the bibs in shimmering silver and gold threads was an intricate tapestry of sacred symbols, the central tree of knowledge, its branches heavy with fruit, a serpent winding cunningly up its trunk, with figures of Adam and Eve standing contemplatively on either side. Intersecting triangles formed a subtle star above the tree, while stylized sun and moon beacons occupied the upper corners. Embroidered letters N-P, G, H, E and stood proudly near the hem, representing the cardinal virtues they cultivated: prudence, growth, harmony, and endurance. Heavy collars of midnight blue velvet rested on their shoulders, connected by sashes crossing their chests, each bearing smaller emblems of their office. Brother Silas, the eldest, his beard white as the apple blossoms overhead, held a polished oak-handled spade upright before him. Its blade, clean and sharp, caught the first watery rays of Sunday. This was their plumb rule, symbolizing uprightness and the breaking of fallow ground, both in the earth and the soul. His deep-set eyes held the calm of centuries. Beside him stood Brother Caleb, younger, his hands still bearing the calluses of daily toil. He held a finely tinned rake, its handle smooth from generations of grip. This was their level, representing the smoothing of life's path, the removal of obstacles, and the creation of a receptive bed. He looked upon the wheelbarrow's load with the eagerness of spring. Completing the triad was Brother Elias, the lodge's master planter for this season. He held a pair of gleaming pruning shears, their blades closed but poised. This was their working tool, akin to the Masonic chisel, representing discernment, the careful removal of the superfluous, and the shaping of potential into purposeful growth. His gaze was thoughtful, measuring the task ahead. "The wheelbarrow stands ready, brothers," intoned Brother Silas, his voice a low rumble like distant thunder. Bearing the substance of renewal, the mulch of decay transformed into the promise of life. As the serpent ascended the tree, seeking knowledge, so must we ascend from ignorance, using the tools bestowed upon us. Brother Caleb stepped forward, raising his rake. "We level the ground of our intentions," he declared, his voice firmer. "We clear away the stones of doubt, the weeds of distraction, that the seeds of virtue may find fertile purchase. This mulch shall blanket the earth, conserving the waters of wisdom, suppressing the unwanted growth of vice." Brother Elias opened the shears with a soft snick. "With discernment, we prune," he stated, his eyes meeting each of his brethren's in turn. "We cut away the dead wood of old habits, the tangled growth of error. We shape not only the plants entrusted to our care, but the garden within ourselves. This mulch," he gestured to the wheelbarrow, "nourishes the roots hidden from sight, as faith nourishes the spirit." The ritual was ancient, passed down through generations of gardeners, since the order's supposed founding in the mist-shrouded gardens of antiquity. While Freemasons worked in symbolic quarries with squares and compasses, shaping stone and character, the gardeners worked the living earth. Their tools were extensions of their philosophy: cultivation, nurture, cyclical renewal. The spade broke open hardened hearts, the rake prepared the soul for planting, the shears refined the spirit. The elaborate apron served as a constant reminder of their origins in Eden's loss and the potential for redemption through diligent, virtuous labor. "Let the work commence," Brother Silas commanded. Brother Caleb took the handles of the heavy wheelbarrow. Brother Silas, with reverence, scooped the first shovelful of fragrant mulch from its bed. Brother Elias walked beside them, shears at the ready, as they processed slowly towards a newly prepared bed near a young pear tree, symbolizing the aspirant entering the lodge. As Brother Silas spread the dark material evenly around the base of the tree, he spoke: "As this mulch protects the roots, conserves moisture, and feeds the tree slowly, so do the virtues of prudence, growth, harmony, and endurance protect and nourish the initiate, shielding him from the harsh elements of the world, allowing his inner light to flourish steadily." Brother Caleb used his rake to gently integrate the mulch into the top layer of soil, ensuring contact. Leveling the path, integrating the lessons, he murmured. Brother Elias examined a small, crossing branch on the young pear tree. With a precise snip of his shears, he removed it. "Pruning for strength, for clear direction," he stated. "Removing that which diverts energy from the true purpose." They worked in harmonious silence then, the only sounds the scrape of the rake, the soft thud of mulch falling, the occasional snick of the shears, and the chorus of awakening birds. The symbols on their aprons seemed to glow in the strengthening light, and the serpent forever coiled on the tree, Adam and Eve forever contemplating choice, the sun and moon marking the eternal cycle, the triangles intersecting like the interconnectedness of all life. The lodge garden was their temple, the wheelbarrow their altar of renewal, the humble mulch their sacrament of transformation. intending the earth with their symbolic tools, wearing the emblems of their ancient craft. The three brothers of the ancient Free Gardeners' Lodge enacted a quiet, living ritual. It was a testament to the belief that true cultivation began not with stone, but with soil, not with grand edifices, but with the patient, deliberate tending of the living world and the soul within it, season after season, generation after generation. The rich, earthy scent of the cedar mulch filled the air, a promise of growth, a benediction written not in words, but in the language of the land. The salt spray stung Angelique's eyes, blurring the terrifying silhouette gaining ground behind her. Her shoulder-length blonde hair whipped wildly around her face, tangling with the sweat beading on her forehead. Her impractical white pumps, with their chunky 3-inch heels, were miraculously still on her feet, but digging uselessly into the stirrups of the terrified mare she urged onward. The vibrant pink fabric of her two-tiered dress and its wide, sleeveless collar bouncing against her collarbones, the crisp white piping stark against the rosy hue and edge was smeared with grime and torn at the hem from scrambling through coastal scrub. This wasn't the Oxnard she remembered, the Oxnard of sun-drenched piers and gentle waves. This was a nightmare ripped straight from the flickering screens of the old Planet of the Apes movies. General Ursus, a hulking mass of muscle clad in leather armor, bellowed a guttural command from his own powerful mount. His guerrilla soldiers, disciplined and brutal, fanned out across the wide beach, their rifles glinting in the harsh afternoon sunday. Angelique risked a glance over her shoulder, her blue eyes wide with terror. Beyond the pounding hooves kicking up sand, beyond the grimacing ape faces, lay the impossible, soul-crushing sight, the colossal, toppled Statue of Liberty. One immense foot was half buried in the sandy shore, the other submerged in the churning surf. The face, eroded but unmistakable, stared emptily out to sea, while the upraised torch, defiantly uncrushed, pierced the surface of the Pacific like a broken promise. You maniacs! You blew it up! Damn you! God damn you all to hell! The astronaut Taylor's final, despairing cry echoed in her mind, a prophecy fulfilled centuries before her birth. Astronauts had returned, lost in time, only to find Earth conquered, humanity enslaved by intelligent apes. This stretch of coastline, familiar, yet horrifyingly altered, was where the old television miniseries had been filmed decades ago and edged scenes of desperate humans fleeing through the dunes and scrub around Ventura, Malibu, and Oxnard. Angelique had seen the reruns, a strange, fictional echo of the brutal reality she now lived. The rigid, militaristic guerrillas enforced the ape hierarchy with ruthless efficiency. The pragmatic, science-minded chimps ran the cities and laboratories, viewing humans as fascinating, sometimes useful, but ultimately inferior specimens. And the ancient, secretive orangutans, like the High Minister she briefly glimpsed in Ape City, clung to dogma and tradition, justifying the simian dominion with their sacred scrolls. They all saw humans as animals, fit only for labor or ellipsis points experimentation. Her mare stumbled, neighing in panic, as they skirted the treacherous rocks marking the edge of Pearl Chaser Oxnard Bay. Angelique hauled on the reins, veering the animal away from the slick stone and back onto the firmer wet sand. The name mocked her now. Once, Pearl Chaser Oxnard Bay meant oyster beds and fishing boats. Now, it was just another stretch of desolate coast in a world ruled by apes. Ursus was closing the gap. She could hear his labored breathing, the creak of his leather harness. He wouldn't take her alive. Not after what she'd overheard in the governor's compound and edged plans for a new round of behavioral conditioning that sounded horrifyingly like lobotomies. She kicked the mare harder, desperation lending her strength. The horse surged forward, galloping parallel to the waterline, where the sand was packed tight. To her left, the vast, gray expanse of the bay. To her right, the crumbling bluffs. Ahead, the coastline curved. If she could just reach the coast past the next headland, the one with the hidden sea caves ellipsis points, it was a slim chance, thinner than the white piping on her ruined dress. Another bellow from Ursus. A rifle shot cracked, kicking up sand perilously close to the mare's front legs. The animal shied violently. Angelique clung on, her white knuckles matching her pumps. She risked another look back. Ursus had drawn a wicked-looking pistol. His small, hate-filled eyes were fixed on her. The Statue of Liberty receded behind them, its submerged torch a grim beacon in the fading light, a monument to human folly and simian triumph. She urged the mare towards the base of the bluffs, seeking any cover. Scraggly ice plants and seagrass whipped at her legs. The chunky heels of her pumps were a liability now, threatening to catch in the stirrups or slip on the uneven ground. She remembered the mini-series heroes, Brent and Verdon, scrambling through similar terrain filmed just north of here. They'd had hope, a mission. She had only fear and the pounding of her own heart. Suddenly, a narrow fissure appeared in the cliff face and edge a go path, steep but climbable, leading upwards. It was her only chance. With a final, desperate dig of her heels, she drove the mare straight towards it. The horse, sensing the escape route, gathered itself and lunged upwards. Angelique leaned forward, pressing herself against the mare's neck, her pink dress bunching around her thighs. She didn't look back, as they scrambled up the path. Below, she heard Ursus roar in frustration, the clatter of hooves on rock, as his heavier mount couldn't follow. Guerrilla shouts echoed, but they sounded distant, thwarted. She crested the small rise, the mare blowing hard beneath her. Below lay the vast curve of Pearl Chaser Oxnard Bay, the ape soldiers' tiny figures milling on the beach near the distant, tragic statue. Further out, the dark shape of an ape patrol boat cut through the waves near the Pearl Chaser Oxnard Bay marker buoy. She was free. For now. Exhaustion warred with elation. Her impractical dress was shredded, her heels scuffed beyond repair, her hair a wild tangle. But she was alive, and Ursus was down there, denied his prize. She turned the mare inland, away from the treacherous bay, away from the submerged symbol of a lost world. She needed to find others, the whispered resistance hidden in the hills. The apes ruled this planet, their future built on humanity's grave. But Angelique, in her torn pink dress and muddy white pumps, clinging to a stolen horse on a cliff above Pearl Chaser Oxnard Bay, was a flicker of defiance in the gathering twilight. The chase wasn't over. It had just begun. The whispering redwoods, a night at Bohemian Grove. The fog clung to San Francisco like a damp shroud, as Arthur Vance navigated his vintage Jaguar towards the discreet entrance off Taylor Street. The clubhouse near Nob Hill, a grand, ivy-clad testament to another era, pulsed with quiet energy. Inside, polished wood and leather held the ghosts of Mark Twain's laughter and Ambrose Bierce's acerbic wit. Arthur, a third-generation member and a titan of private equity, exchanged curt nods with fellow bosses. Tonight wasn't for city comforts, it was time for the exodus to the Grove. Hours later, the roar of private jets and Gulf Streams and Globals and pierced the stillness of Sonoma County air, depositing captains of industry, former presidents, media moguls, and power brokers onto the Grove's private airstrip. Their arrival was a stark contrast to the Grove's founding ethos. Back in 1872, it was painters, writers, and musicians and bohemians fleeing city constraints and who established this 2,700-acre sanctuary of ancient coastal redwoods. They sought creative freedom, camaraderie, and a connection to the wild. Men like poet George Sterling, who, captivated by the primeval atmosphere, wrote the rituals that would become the Grove's mystical backbone. Sterling's friend, Jack London, alluded to the Grove's potent, secretive allure in his semi-autobiographical novel Martin Eden, describing Eden's fascination with a shadowy, influential men's club nestled in the redwoods and a place of both artistic ferment and unsettling power dynamics. Arthur felt that duality keenly. He cherished the escape, the sheer, overwhelming beauty of the towering redwoods draped in hanging moss, the symphony of crickets and owls replacing the city's din. He enjoyed the camaraderie, the silly costumes, the mandatory informality, where billionaires were called scribe or lumberjack. But the modern reality was undeniable. The businessmen, the politicians, the intelligence chiefs and their presence was heavier, their agendas sometimes palpable beneath the veneer of play. The jets weren't just transportation, they were symbols of a global influence converging in this hidden valley. The heart of the experience lay in the jinx. Tonight was the hijinks and a lavish lakeside spectacle. Elaborate sets rose beside the water, professional actors mingled with members in fantastical garb, and a full orchestra swelled, as a Shakespearean pastiche unfolded under the stars. It was impressive, absurd, expensive and a testament to the resources now poured into the bohemian dream. Arthur chuckled at a particularly bad pun delivered by a senator playing a tipsy puck. This was the acceptable face of the Grove, the artistic legacy polished to a high sheen. But Arthur knew the other side. The low jinks was where masks truly slipped. In dimly lit camps with names like Caveman and Mandalay, fueled by expensive bourbon and the anonymity of the forest, the humor turned raunchier, the conversations franker, the deals sometimes sketched out on cocktail napkins. It was a pressure valve, a space for the powerful to shed their public personas in a carefully controlled environment. The line between harmless bacchanalia and something more unsettling felt thin here, under the watchful gaze of the ancient trees. Arthur felt a familiar unease creep in, as the hour for the central ritual approached. He made his way towards the lake. The air grew hushed, expectant. Torchlight flickered on faces both reverent and merely curious. Before a small, man-made island stood the focal point, a towering, stone owl, its blank eyes reflecting the flames. This was the site of the cremation of care ceremony, penned by Sterling. Hooded figures emerged, chanting dirges about worldly woes. A small, symbolic effigy and dull care and was solemnly placed at the owl's feet. As flames consumed it, the chant rose, Moloch. We bring you this fire. Burn away our care. Moloch. The name echoed, primal and strange. Arthur understood the ritual's intended symbolism and the burning of burdens, the embrace of renewal. Sterling had likely drawn on diverse mythologies, perhaps conflating symbols. But hearing Moloch chanted in this setting, by these men, sent a shiver down his spine. He couldn't help but think of the modern conspiracy theorists, like Alex Jones on InfoWars, who had famously infiltrated the Grove years prior. Jones had screamed about satanic rituals, blood sacrifices, and the worship of Moloch and the ancient Canaanite god associated with child sacrifice. Arthur knew it was grotesque hyperbole, a dangerous distortion. Yet, the image stuck. The sheer, bizarre spectacle fed the paranoia. He thought of a recent television miniseries, Tyrant, starring Damian Lewis. In one chilling scene, the protagonist, a prosecutor investigating a powerful dictator, confronts his estranged father at a secretive gathering. They meet not in a boardroom, but before a giant stone owl. The implication was clear: the father was part of a shadowy cabal, and the owl symbolized their ruthless, hidden power. It was pure fiction, but it borrowed the Grove's most potent, enigmatic symbol. The owl wasn't Moloch, but in the public imagination, fueled by whispers and shows like Tyrant, the lines blurred. The owl became shorthand for an accountable elite power, for rituals whose true purpose remained veiled, perhaps even to some participants. Standing there, watching the embers of care die before the impassive owl, Arthur Vance felt the weight of history and hysteria. This place, founded by artists seeking the sublime, was now a crucible where art, power, secrecy, and myth collided. The redwoods whispered secrets older than Sterling's rhymes, older than the Moloch myth. As the final Moloch echoed and faded, Arthur wondered not about ancient gods, but about the modern ones who walked among these trees, their care perhaps not so easily burned, their ritual shaping a world far beyond the Grove's guarded gates. The true sacrifice, he mused, turning away from the dying flames, might be the Grove's own founding innocence, consumed long ago by the relentless fire of ambition and influence. The weight of February, the chill of the second month, February, in the 22nd year of the new millennium, 2022 AD, bit deeper than usual across the Ukrainian plains. On the 24th day of that frozen month, the world watched, stunned, as Russian President Vladimir Putin announced a special military operation. Its stated aims: the denazification of Ukraine and halting an alleged genocide of Russian speakers perpetrated by the Kyiv government, and claims vehemently denied by Ukraine and widely dismissed internationally, as baseless pretexts. The 22nd year had barely begun, and Europe was plunged into its largest conflict since 1945. Massive Russian echelons, long columns of tanks, armored personnel carriers, and support vehicles, rolled across the borders simultaneously from the north towards Kyiv, the east from the Donbas regions already partially occupied since 2014, and the south from Crimea, aiming for Kherson and beyond. State media broadcasts hammered home the narrative: Russia was acting as a protector, shielding ethnic Russians and Russian speakers from a fascist junta in Kyiv intent on their eradication. This justification echoed through every state-controlled channel, a relentless drumbeat accompanying the artillery fire. On the ground, reality was a brutal shock. Ukrainian forces, vastly outgunned initially but fueled by a fierce determination to defend their homeland, met the invasion with an expected resistance. near Hostomel Airport north of Kyiv, in the muddy fields of Chernihiv, and along the southern approaches to Kherson, soldiers and hastily mobilized territorial defense fighters scrambled to dig in. The frozen earth yielded reluctantly to shovels, but soon, rudimentary foxholes dotted the landscape. On the other side, Russian conscripts and contract soldiers, many confused about their mission, also scraped shallow pits for cover, creating their own foxhole networks facing the Ukrainians. Trenches would come later. In those first chaotic days, a hole in the ground was the only shield against mortar fragments and sniper fire. In distant Langley, Virginia, and within secure bunkers across NATO capitals, analysts pored over a deluge of intelligence. Satellite imagery tracked the lumbering Russian echelons. Signals intelligence SIGINT buzzed with intercepted communications and fragmented, often encrypted, but revealing patterns of movement, confusion, and logistical nightmares plaguing the invaders. Cyber intelligence units worked around the clock, tracking disruptive attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure and probing Russian networks for vulnerabilities or indications of intent. Amidst the flood of data, a specific, recurring phrase began to stand out in intercepted low-level Russian military traffic, often fragmented or heavily coded: Echelon Foxhole 0222-1. CIA analysts initially puzzled over it. Was it a location code? A unit identifier? A status report? Echelon Foxhole 0222-1 seemed to correlate with reports of stalled convoys or units taking defensive positions under fire during that pivotal second month of the invasion. It appeared in sitroops mentioning casualties and requests for support. Echelon Foxhole 0222-1 and the digits 02 clearly pointed to February, the 22 to the year. Echelon suggested a formation, likely battalion or company sized. Foxhole implied a defensive posture, dug in, vulnerable. One remained ambiguous and perhaps a unit designation, a sector, or simply denoting the primary element. It painted a picture of a specific component within the vast Russian machine, bogged down, forced into a defensive crouch far sooner than Moscow's planners had anticipated. Each intercepted repetition of Echelon Foxhole 0222-1 became a small data point confirming the stiff Ukrainian resistance and the faltering momentum of specific Russian thrusts, particularly the northern axis aimed at Kyiv. The initial Russian strategy relied on speed and shock, bypassing major resistance to seize key objectives like Kyiv. Ukrainian forces, however, adapted with astonishing speed. Ambushes targeted the long, vulnerable Russian echelons snaking along highways. Western supplied anti-tank weapons, like the La and Javelin, proved devastating against Russian armor caught in the open or strung out in convoy. The vast front lines, from Kharkiv in the northeast to the outskirts of Mykolaiv in the south, solidified into a deadly stalemate punctuated by brutal artillery duels. The foxholes dug in that first month became deeper, more complex trench systems, as the conflict settled into a grueling war of attrition. The Kremlin's narrative of liberation and denazification rang hollow in the ruins of Mariupol, Bucha, and countless other towns scarred by the invasion launched in that fateful 22nd year. The alleged genocide Russia claimed to prevent became overshadowed by the very real devastation its own forces inflicted. The conflict exposed not just the limits of Russian military planning and logistics, but the profound resilience of a nation defending its existence. The phrase intercepted by cyber intelligence and Echelon Foxhole 0222-1 and became, in hindsight, an early cryptic testament to the miscalculation. A modern military force, envisioned as an unstoppable echelon, rapidly reduced to seeking safety in a foxhole, its grand objectives crumbling in the frozen mud of February 2022. It was a chilling signature of a war that defied all of Moscow's expectations from its very first, brutal month. Vera's equation. The Saturday sun dappled through the canvas awnings of the Harborview Farmers Market, painting warm stripes on baskets of heirloom tomatoes and jars of raw honey. Amidst the cheerful chaos, Vera Volkov moved with the unhurried grace of a deep water current. Mid-40s, she wore tailored linen trousers and a silk camisole the color of storm clouds, her dark hair swept into an effortless knot revealing a sharp, elegant profile. She examined a bunch of lavender, her fingers long and sure, radiating a calm authority that made the bustling crowd seem to part subtly around her. This wasn't just shopping, it was a statement. mature, irresistible, luscious, feminine and edge. The unspoken acronym hung in the air around her like expensive perfume. She was, quite simply, the archetype, the kind of woman men glanced at twice and women watched with a mixture of admiration and wary appraisal. To the young guy sipping cold brew nearby, she was undeniably a MILF. Vera wasn't oblivious to the label. She understood the power dynamics it implied and edged a blend of desire and a certain dismissive categorization. She'd heard the whispers since her 30s, first with surprise, then with a wry amusement that hardened into a tool. In the world she navigated and edged, a world far removed from organic kale but intimately tied to the docks lining this very harbor, and edged perception was armor. As the matriarch of the Raven Riders Motorcycle Club, widow of its formidable late president, and mother to its current VP Alexa, Vera operated in a sphere where softness was mistaken for weakness. She cultivated the MILF image deliberately, the effortless style, the yoga home poise every Wednesday morning. She commanded the front row, a study in focused strength, the aura of contained sensuality. It disarmed. It distracted. It made men underestimate the steel beneath the silk. Later, in the dim, polished wood interior of the Anchorage, the club's semi-legitimate bar, Vera sat at a corner booth reviewing ledgers. The low thrum of classic rock and the clink of glasses were her white noise. A prospect nervously approached with a message about a delayed shipment. Vera looked up, her gaze level and assessing. She didn't raise her voice, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop a degree. Her instructions were precise, delivered in a tone that brooked no argument. The prospect scurried away. Marco, the grizzled bartender who'd seen presidents come and go, caught her eye and gave a barely perceptible nod of respect. He'd served bikers for 30 years. Vera Volkov was a different MILF entirely, and edged one whose elegance masked a will of forged iron. The crisis erupted not with gunfire, but with a hissed phone call to Alexa. Dmitry Sokolov, a brash newcomer trying to muscle in on Raven Rider territory near the shipyards, had made a move. Worse, he'd implied threats involving Alexei's younger sister, Anaya, away at college. Vera's expression, as Alexei relayed the news, didn't flicker. But the air around her crackled, static before a storm. The mature composure hardened into something ancient and predatory. The irresistible allure vanished, replaced by a chilling focus. This wasn't about business, this was about her blood. She didn't call a war council. She went alone, dressed not in leather, but in a sleek black dress and heels that clicked like measured heartbeats on the concrete floor of Sokolov's grimy import warehouse. He was surrounded by 4 of his men, smirking, expecting bluster or negotiation from Alexa. Seeing Vera, his smirk widened into something leering. Well, the Raven Rider MILF comes calling. To what do I owe the ellipsis points pleasure? Vera ignored him, her eyes scanning the dim space, noting exits, potential weapons, the nervous shift of the youngest thug. You mentioned my daughter, Dmitry, she stated, her voice low and clear, cutting through the warehouse echo. That was a miscalculation. Sokolov chuckled. Just making sure you understand the stakes, Bereshnaya. Vera took a step closer. The luscious curve of her lips didn't form a smile. I understand stakes. I also understand consequences. You see, Dmitry, she continued, her tone conversational, almost intimate, you operate on fear and bluster. We operate on loyalty and ellipsis points memory. She tapped her temple. I remember every face in this room. I remember where your sister takes her children to play. I remember the name of your aging mother in Odessa. Her gaze locked onto his, feminine grace replaced by glacial ferocity. Touch a single hair on Anaya's head, breathe a threat near her again, and the suffering I will visit upon everyone you have ever cared for will make hell look like a spa retreat. It won't be quick. And it will be traced back to you. The silence was absolute. Sokolov's smirk had vanished, replaced by a dawning, sickly realization. He'd seen biker rage. This was different. This was maternal fury, honed by years of navigating criminal empires, wrapped in a terrifyingly elegant package. The men behind him exchanged uneasy glances. The MILF standing before them was a predator in preda. You think you scare me? Sokolov blustered, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. I don't need to scare you, Dmitry, Vera said softly, turning to leave. I just need you to understand the equation. Harm my family, and yours is erased. Every single one. The choice is yours. Make it wisely. Her heels echoed again, as she walked out, leaving behind a silence thick with dread. Back at the anchorage, Alexei met her at the door. "Well, he understands the terms," Vera replied, her voice regaining its usual calm resonance. She smoothed her dress, the terrifying avenger receding once more beneath the poised surface. She poured 2 glasses of expensive bourbon, not the cheap bar stuff. "Sometimes, Alexei," she said, handing him a glass, her eyes holding the wisdom of countless battles fought in boardrooms, back alleys, and the treacherous currents of the heart. "The myth is the armor. Let them whisper MILF. It only gives us the edge." She sipped her drink, the picture of elegant composure, the alpha female who ruled not just with force, but with the devastating, multifaceted power of who she was. Mature, irresistible, luscious, feminine, and utterly, lethally, and forgiving when crossed. The July sun hammered down on the reconstructed stone parapets of Fort Defiance, baking the mortar and turning the air above the parking lot into a shimmering mirage. Angelique felt the heat radiate through the thin soles of her white, chunky 3-inch pumps, as she navigated the gravel path beside the construction zone. The crew was repairing a section of the historic Union Fort's outer wall, their shirts soaked through with sweat, the rhythmic clang of trowels on stone mixing with the whine of a distant cement mixer. She was a deliberate splash of defiant color against the dusty khaki and faded denim. Her shoulder-length blonde hair, catching the sunlight like spun gold, framed a face meticulously painted. Swish eyeshadow 1863, a bold, almost electric blue swept across her lids, and lips a vibrant, classic red. The pink sleeveless dress hugged her curves perfectly, stopping several inches above the knees. Its 2-tiered skirt flared slightly with each step, the crisp white piping along the seams and the wide neckline offering a stark, clean contrast. At her ears, 10mm pearls glowed with a subtle luster, catching the eye as she moved. Angelique knew they were watching. She felt the collective gaze of the construction crew like a physical touch as she approached. She adjusted the strap of her small handbag on her shoulder and consciously let her hips find their rhythm. Swish, swish went the tiers of her dress. Swish, swish went the subtle sway, a deliberate, confident cadence amplified by the crunch of gravel under her heels. One worker paused, trowel hovering over mortar, his eyes tracking her progress. Another nudged his partner, who wiped sweat from his brow and grinned, a low whistle barely audible over the construction din. Angelique kept her chin up, a faint, knowing curve touching her red lips. Let them look. She was a walking daydream in the middle of their sweaty reality. But as she drew level with the gap in the wall, where the crew worked, the scene before her seemed to warp. The modern construction tools blurred. The sounds shifted and as the mixer's whine deepened into the thunderous roar of cannon fire. Thick, acrid smoke billowed suddenly, not from the mixer's exhaust, but from the mouths of blackened iron cannons positioned along the fort's restored ramparts. The refuned stones of the reconstruction seemed to solidify, older, grimmier, bearing the pockmarks of age and conflict. Through the smoke, figures resolved. Columns of black Union soldiers, faces etched with determination and fatigue, marched in tight formation just inside the fort's walls, their blue uniforms stark against the dusty earth. Their boots kicked up clouds, as they passed a makeshift wooden podium. Upon it, impossibly tall and gaunt, stood Abraham Lincoln. His stovepipe hat was unmistakable, his face grave, as he held aloft a document, his deep, resonant voice somehow cutting through the cannonade, as he intoned words she couldn't quite hear but knew instinctively. All persons held, as slaves within any state, shall be then, thenceforward, and forever free, the Emancipation Proclamation. A chill ran down Angelique's spine, despite the July heat. This wasn't the tourist attraction. This was then. Swish eyeshadow 1863 felt suddenly absurd, a glaring anachronism. Her pink dress was a beacon in this monochrome nightmare of smoke, blue wool, and dirt. She tried to keep walking, the crunch of her chunky heels impossibly loud now, the swish of her skirt feeling obscenely frivolous. Her gaze, drawn upwards in dread, found the ridge beyond the fort's northern wall. There, emerging from the haze like phantoms of a future yet to be born, were figures on horseback, clad in flowing white robes that seemed to glow with a sinister light against the smoky backdrop, their faces hidden beneath pointed hoods. The Ku Klux Klan, silent sentinels of hatred, watching the birth of freedom with malevolent stillness from their vantage point. Observing Lincoln, observing the marching black soldiers, observing the fort that symbolized the Union's defiance. One of the spectral horsemen turned its shrouded head, not towards Lincoln, not towards the soldiers, but directly towards her. Angelique froze mid-stride, one white pump hovering above the gravel path that now felt like the edge of a precipice. The horseman's gaze, unseen but profoundly felt, pinned her in place. It wasn't curiosity, it was an assessment, cold and ancient, fixing on her modern vibrancy, her exposed shoulders, her defiant swish. I should 1863, her very presence in this fractured moment of time. Panic, sharp and icy, threatened to engulf her. She wanted to run, to hide from that terrible, faceless scrutiny. But something else rose within her and edged a fierce, irrational defiance. This was her time too. She wasn't a ghost, she was flesh and blood, walking past sweaty men fixing a wall on a Tuesday afternoon. She met the horseman's unseen stare. Slowly, deliberately, Angelique lowered her foot. The chunky heel connected firmly with the gravel. Crunch. She squared her shoulders, making the wide neck of her pink dress frame her collarbones. She tilted her chin higher. Then, with a deliberation that felt like an act of war against the oppressive dread emanating from the ridge, she let her hips sway again. Swish, swish. The two-tiered skirt flared around her thighs. She focused on the motion, the sheer, vibrant life of it. Swish. I should 1863 and edge a slash of modern blue defiance against the washed-out horror of the past. She didn't look back at the horseman. She kept walking, her stride regaining its confident rhythm, the crunch swish of her passage a counterpoint to the phantom cannon fire. She walked past the spot where Lincoln's voice still echoed, past the marching columns already fading like smoke, towards the modern parking lot shimmering ahead. As she reached the edge of the construction zone, the sounds abruptly normalized. The cannon fire ceased, replaced by the mundane grumble of the cement mixer. The smoke vanished, leaving only the smell of hot dust and drying mortar. The workers were back, one still openly staring, another chuckling. Angelique felt the weight of the spectral gaze lift. She paused just beyond the last pile of stones, turned slightly, and cast one last look back at the solid, reconstructed wall of Fort Defiance. The ridge beyond was empty, just sun-baked grass and trees. A slow, deliberate smile touched her red lips. She gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod and edged not to the construction workers, but to the lingering echo of history. Then, adjusting the strap of her bag, Angelique Volkov walked on, the pearls at her ears catching the sun, the pink dress a bright flag of the present, the swish. I should 1863 a final, silent declaration etched onto the fading memory of the past. The Blooming Promise, Pasadena, 1901. Dawn on New Year's Day, 1901, in Pasadena, California, held a crispness unique to the San Gabriel Valley winter. A thin layer of frost silvered the orange groves, but the sky above the fledgling town was a vast, optimistic blue. Excitement, sharp and fragrant, as the citrus blossoms clinging defiantly to branches, crackled in the air. Today, Pasadena would declare its essence to the world, not with gold or grain, but with flowers. Today was the very first Tournament of Roses parade. Professor Charles F. Holder, president of the Valley Hunt Club, adjusted his cravat nervously, his breath misting in the chill. His vision envisioned a festival to showcase California's winter Garden of Eden to snowbound Easterners, and Edge was about to roll down Colorado Boulevard. Would anyone come? Would the blooms hold? Would the horses behave? The weight of inaugurating a tradition pressed upon him. It was January 1st, 1901, a new century, and Pasadena was staking its claim. Along the unpaved street, townsfolk bundled in wool coats and mufflers gathered. Children, cheeks rosy, perched on fathers' shoulders. Ladies huddled under parasols recomposed against the surprising chill, their eyes bright with anticipation. Word had spread, decorated carriages, buggies, and equestrians, all adorned with nature's bounty, would process. It was a gentle rebellion against winter, a declaration that here, life and beauty persisted year-round. A hush fell, then a collective gasp. Around the bend, led by the stately Pasadena City Band playing My Old Kentucky Home, came the procession. It wasn't the miles-long spectacle of future years, perhaps 50 entries in total, but to the citizens of Pasadena, it was magnificent. First came the horsemen of the Valley Hunt Club, resplendent in riding pinks, their mounts groomed to gleaming perfection. but it was the decorations that stole the breath. Horses wore garlands of smilax and maidenhair fur woven with velvety crimson roses and bright orange marigolds. Bridles were entwined with ivy and heliotrope. One prancing gelding had miniature baskets of violets and pansies secured to its browband, looking like a creature stepped from a fairy tale. Then came the carriages. Oh, the carriages! A simple farm wagon transformed into a rolling bower smothered in white chrysanthemums, yellow acacia, and feathery asparagus fern. A stately landau-carried lady swathed in furs, its sides festooned with elaborate designs of carnations and lilies spelling out Happy New Year. Children peeked from under canopies dripping with chains of evergreens and bright berries. One enterprising family had created a miniature windmill entirely covered in golden poppies and barley grains, its sails turning gently in the breeze and as a nod to the region's diverse bounty. But the undisputed star, the embodiment of Holder's dream, was the float commissioned by the Crown City Livery Stable. It wasn't a float, as we know it today, but a sturdy farm wagon painstakingly transformed. Its bed was a raised platform covered in lush, damp moss. Upon this verdant carpet stood a triumphant chariot, fashioned from woven willow branches and smilax vines. Pulling this mythical vehicle were four magnificent white horses, their manes braided with ribbons and roses, their harnesses gleaming. And standing proudly within the chariot, holding aloft a scepter fashioned from a gilded orange branch, was the very first queen of the Tournament of Roses. She was Miss Hollywood's, chosen for her grace and local prominence. Bundled against the cold in a long white gown largely hidden by a luxurious fur wrap, only her determinedly smiling face and the glittering crown of fresh roses and baby's breath were truly visible. Her chariot was heaped with roses and edged hundreds of them, crimson, pink, white, and yellow, and edged a cascading avalanche of petals and fragrance. Camellias nestled amongst the roses, and trails of ivy cascaded over the wagon's sides. It was simple, breathtaking, and unequivocally floral. A gasp, then thunderous applause rippled down the street as she passed. This was Pasadena's heart, blooming defiantly in January. The procession continued, buggies decorated with simple elegance featuring clusters of calla lilies, a group of cyclists with wicker baskets on their handlebars overflowing with sweet peas, children on ponies trailing streamers of colored paper and tinsel intertwined with ivy. Professor Holder, riding alongside the judges, felt a lump form in his throat. It was working. The air, though cold, was thick with the perfume of roses, carnations, mums, and orange blossoms. Laughter mingled with the band music and the rhythmic clop of hoofs on the hard-packed earth. It was January 1st, 1901, and Pasadena was painting winter with spring. Near the end of the route, a particularly elaborate entry caused a stir. A large hay wagon had been transformed into a miniature mountain scene. Rocks painted burlap were covered in lichen and moss. Tiny waterfalls cascaded down cunningly arranged tinsel over chicken wire. But the centerpiece was a towering tree, its trunk wrapped in brown paper, its branches constructed of wire laden with hundreds of white and pink almond blossoms, painstakingly collected and wired by an army of volunteers. Nestled at its base were figures representing California's history and a Spanish explorer, a local grocer in borrowed conquistador gear, a Franciscan friar the town librarian, and a gold rush prospector the blacksmith, complete with pen. It was ambitious, slightly waddly, and utterly charming. As the parade concluded near the original tournament park, the crowd surged forward, not to disperse, but to mingle, admire the floral creations up close, and share in the palpable sense of achievement. Children darted between the wheels, collecting stray petals like precious gems. Gentlemen doffed hats to the queen, who, still standing bravely in her chilly chariot, finally allowed her smile to relax into genuine warmth. The band struck up a lively march. The year 1901 was barely hours old, and Pasadena had already given it a crown of flowers. Professor Holder, surrounded by well-wishers and fellow club members, beamed. "Gentlemen," he declared, his voice thick with emotion, "I believe we have started something quite remarkable." He looked around at the smiling faces, the wilting but glorious blooms, the horses steaming gently in the now rising Sunday. It was more than a parade, it was a promise. A promise of beauty, of community, of California's unique gift to a winter-weary nation. This modest procession down a small town street on January 1st, 1901, was the fragile seed from which a global spectacle would grow. They had called it a tournament of roses, and on this bright, cold morning, the name felt like prophecy fulfilled. The first petal had fallen, and a century of bloom had begun. The blooming march, a procession of the ancient free gardeners. The high street of Milcross hadn't seen such color since the coronation. Bunting, faded but proud, fluttered between Tudor beams and Georgian brick. Sunlight, rare and precious for late April, gilded the cobblestones and warmed the expectant faces lining the route. Then, the sound arrived, not martial drums, but the deep, resonant harmony of a brass band playing all things bright and beautiful. And behind the music, came the gardeners. They were the ancient free gardeners of the Loyal Oak Lodge No. 17, marching in full regalia for their annual spring equinox parade. 100 strong, men and, surprisingly, a significant contingent of women. They moved with a dignified pace that spoke of deep-rooted tradition, not military drill. They wore their Sunday best beneath their defining vestments, aprons of the deepest, richest blue, cut in a style reminiscent of Freemasonry but distinctly their own. Not leather, but heavy, embroidered linen or velvet. Upon each apron bloomed a magnificent tapestry of thread. Central was the tree of life, branches heavy with symbolic fruit and edged pomegranates for abundance, apples for knowledge. At its roots, intricately stitched figures, Adam and Eve, not in shame, but standing with quiet dignity beside the coiled serpent, its expression more contemplative than cunning. Elsewhere, Noah's dove carried an olive branch, a sheaf of wheat stood tall beside a pruning hook, and bees buzzed around hexagonal hives. Biblical symbology intertwined with the agrarian cycle and edged creation, stewardship, and the promise of harvest. Over their shoulders, diagonally across crisp waistcoats and dark jackets, they wore sashes of emerald green silk. Embroidered on each sash in golden thread, glinting in the sun, was their enigmatic motto, Sash Agrarian Weakfish Unionism. It was a phrase whispered with reverence by members and puzzled over by onlookers, a cryptic blend of horticulture, labor, and resilience. They carried signs aloft on polished poles, echoing the spirit of the age but filtered through their unique philosophy. Fair wages for fair labor, stood beside the earth is the Lord's and the fruitfulness thereof. A large banner, borne by 4 sturdy members, depicted a muscular arm emerging from fertile soil, clasping a pruning knife that seamlessly transformed into a quill pen and edged sash. Agrarian Weakfish Unionism arched proudly above the scene. Another banner showed a diverse group of laborers and edge field hands, orchard keepers, weavers who worked with linen and wool and edge united beneath a benevolent sun, the words mutual aid and brotherly love prominent, underscored again by the phrase Sash Agrarian Weakfish Unionism. The villagers waved enthusiastically. Children darted forward to touch the vibrant aprons before being gently shepherded back by parents. Old Mr. Hemmings, who remembered the Chartist rallies of his youth, wiped a tear from his eye, seeing the familiar demand for representation and dignity woven into this gentler, more rooted spectacle. "There's good folk," he muttered to his neighbor. "Know the value of the soil and the value of a man's sweat." The band shifted to Jerusalem, and a soft murmur of singing rose from the marchers and the crowd alike. Amidst the throng, on the sidewalk beside the bustling King's Arms, Jem Carter, the fishmonger, saw his opportunity. His barrel overflowed with the morning's catch from the river and edged glistening trout, plump perch, and silvery bundles of the small, delicate fish known locally as weakfish. Their flesh was sweet but tender, easily torn by careless nets or strong currents, a symbol, the gardeners often noted in their allegorical teachings, of the vulnerable laborer in a harsh world. Fresh weakfish. Jem bellowed, his voice cutting through the music and the cheers. "Get your fresh weakfish. Sweet as a nut, tender as new growth. Support your local river, support your local man. Strength in the shoal, eh?" He winked at a passing gardener whose sash prominently displayed the golden motto. The gardener, a stern-faced man named Elias Thorne, head gardener at the manor, gave a curt, acknowledging nod. Sash Agrarian Weakfish Unionism wasn't just words on silk, it was a living philosophy. The weakfish needed the collective strength of the shoal to survive the currents, just as the laborer needed the union, the friendly society, the mutual support of the lodge against the riptides of exploitation and misfortune. Buying Jem's weakfish was a small act of community solidarity. As the procession passed Jem's stand, a young gardener, barely out of his apprenticeship, peeled off from the ranks. He carried a collecting tin marked Lodge Benevolent Fund. He approached Jem, not for a sale, but with a smile. "Brother Carter," he said formally, though his eyes were bright. "The Logic extends greetings on this equinox. Might the fund benefit from the sale of a portion of your fine catch for our communal supper tonight?" Jem beamed. This was tradition too. "Aye, lad, that it might. Take a good measure of the weak fish and dash on a discount for the brethren, of course. Tell Brother Thorn they're prime today." He carefully scooped a generous portion into a woven rush basket the young man produced. The transaction was more than commerce, it was ritual, affirmation. The lodge supported its own, and in turn, the community supported the lodge. The weak fish, symbol of fragility, became sustenance for the collective. The parade wound its way towards the village green, where a great marquee was erected for the feast and speeches. The banners caught the breeze, the tree of life, the laborer's arm, the sun of mutual aid. The signs proclaiming fair dealing and fraternity shone in the sunlight. The blue aprons formed a moving garden of embroidered faith and toil. And the sashes, emerald green against the deep blue, continuously whispered their potent, enigmatic promise to those who understood. Sash Agrarian Weak Fish Unionism. It spoke of the dignity of labor rooted in the earth agrarian. It acknowledged the vulnerability of the individual worker, easily crushed like the weak fish. It proclaimed the absolute necessity of collective action, of the unionism embodied in their friendly society, their trade protections, their lodge itself. And it bound it all together with the symbol of the sash and dash, a mark of belonging, honor, and the diagonal band connecting shoulder to hip, just as their philosophy connected the practical needs of the body with the spiritual aspirations of the soul, the individual to the community, the tiller of the soil to the divine plan woven into every leaf and branch depicted on their aprons. Watching them gather on the green, the villagers felt a sense of deep, enduring order. The ancient free gardeners weren't revolutionaries shouting from barricades, they were the steady, slow-growing oaks of community, their roots fed by mutual aid, their branches offering shelter, their peculiar motto, Sash Agrarian Weak Fish Unionism, a seed of resilience planted deep in the fertile soil of shared struggle and blossoming fellowship. As the band struck up a final, joyous air, the scent of Jem Carter's fresh weak fish, soon to be shared in the marquee, mingled with the spring air, a humble, earthy testament to their enduring creed. The Ballroom Cascade, Sarajevo, 1914. The Grand Ballroom of the Europa Hotel shimmered, a microcosm of a continent convinced of its own eternal sophistication. It was 1914, and the air hummed not just with waltzes played by a discreet orchestra, but with the brittle tension of unspoken rivalries and meticulously balanced power. Crystal chandeliers cast prisms of light onto a polished parquet floor and Asia floor meticulously inlaid to resemble a map of Europe. Delicate gold script marked Belgium, Serbia, France, Austria-Hungary. High above, silken banners hung like pronouncements from the rafters. Nationalism, in bold, assertive script. Imperialism, draped in regal purple. Alliances, woven with intricate, interlocking threads. Through the towering double doors, Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary entered, stiff in his ceremonial uniform. Beside him, Duchess Sophie, radiant in pale silk, offered a gracious smile that seemed almost fragile against the room's charged atmosphere. Their entrance was met with a ripple of polite applause, a formality masking the complex web of glances exchanged between diplomats and officers representing a dozen nations. The year was 1914, and the stage was set. Don yet grasped the script. Across the crowded floor, an Otis near a potted palm, stood a young man with fever-bright eyes, Gavrilo Princip. His hand, hidden in the pocket of his shabby jacket, clenched not around a dance card, but around cold, carved wood. As the Archduke and Duchess began a slow circuit of the room, nodding to dignitaries, Princip moved with sudden, desperate purpose. He withdrew his hand and flung an object towards the center of the dance floor. It wasn't a grenade, nor a pistol. It was a domino. But this domino was carved and painted with chilling precision, the unmistakable shape of a Browning automatic pistol, its dark wood mimicking blued steel. It landed with a sharp clack on the mat-inlaid floor, directly over the label Sarajevo. The sound echoed, impossibly loud in the sudden hush. The music stuttered. Franz Ferdinand flinched, looking down at the grotesque wooden gun. Sophie's hand tightened on his arm. Then, the cascade began. Near the gun domino stood the first figure, a domino carved and painted, as a soldier of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, resplendent in blue and red, its tips replaced by the double-headed eagle crest. The impact of the gun domino struck its base. It wobbled for a heart-stopping moment, the banners overhead seeming to ripple and dash alliances, shimmering with sudden urgency, and then it tipped. With a decisive click, the Austro-Hungarian soldier domino fell forward. It struck the next in line, a domino carved into the unmistakable, spiked pickle hub helmet of Imperial Germany. Rigid, gray, imposing. The German domino fell without hesitation, a perfect, mechanical topple dictated by gravity and fate. Its fall echoed the rigid certainties of the Schlieffen plan already locked in staff officers' minds. The map beneath it, near Belgium, seemed to tremble. Click. The German domino struck the next, a domino shaped like a bear, draped in the green greatcoat of Tsarist Russia, immense and seemingly immovable. Yet, it fell. Its slow, ponderous descent seemed to shake the entire ballroom floor, the banner proclaiming nationalism, fluttering, as if caught in a sudden draft. The parquet beneath Serbia groaned, a hairline crack appearing. Click. The Russian bear domino struck the domino shaped as a French poilu, wearing the iconic horizon blue uniform and Adrian helmet. It fell swiftly, almost gracefully, a testament to the Republic's resolve. As it toppled, the section of the floor marked France visibly sagged, plaster dust puffing from the edges, where France met Belgium. The banner imperialism seemed to darken. Click. Finally, the French domino struck the last figure, a domino meticulously carved as a British Tommy, complete with a Brodie helmet and Lee-Enfield rifle slung over its wooden shoulder. It stood for a fraction longer, as if contemplating isolation. Then, inevitably, decisively, it fell. Its descent was the loudest clack yet, resonating like a closing vault. Silence. Utter, profound silence. The orchestra had stopped. The dancers were frozen statues. The only movement was the settling dust motes in the chandelier light. Then, the floor began to crumble in earnest. The intricate map, so carefully laid, fragmented along the national boundaries. Belgium splintered into jagged pieces, falling away into darkness. Serbia dissolved into a rubble. France cracked and sagged, a gaping maw opening beneath it. Plaster and wood groaned, as the foundations of the symbolic Europe gave way, mirroring the political foundations about to shatter. Franz Ferdinand stared at the wreckage, his face ashen. Sophie clung to him, her earlier radiance extinguished by dread. Princip had vanished, swallowed by the stunned crowd, leaving only the terrible chain reaction he had initiated. The banners overhead seemed to pulse in the unnatural quiet. Nationalism now felt like a war cry, imperialism, a death knell, alliances, a suffocating net. The elegant ballroom of 1914, a stage for diplomacy and dance mere moments ago, was now a ruin of fallen wooden soldiers and a collapsing world. The dominoes lay still, a perfect, terrible line of destruction stretching from Sarajevo across the imagined continent. The last echoes of their falling faded, leaving only the heavy silence of a continent holding its breath, poised on the precipice of an abyss that had opened in the summer of 1914. The waltz was over. The guns would speak next.